Bum ba dum bum bum ba da bum ba dum ba doom ba da ba ba doo ba da beep beep ba da bum 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 ba da da bum 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 ba da bum 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 ba da bum bum. Do. We've done it. We're streaming. Here we are. Content, good to see you, my man. Good to see you. Man, this weekend was like, what a humbling weekend for me. I feel like I was routinely humbled this weekend. And it's good. It's good. It's good to kind of have a, like a check, just to remind yourself that, like, you're not hot shit. I'm not hot shit. I should be specific about who I'm talking about. I kind of get into this place sometimes where I'm like, yeah, I'm doing great. I'm the greatest. I'm the greatest in the world. Yeah, no, I'm like Muhammad Ali in my brain. I'm like, I'm the greatest in the world. Nobody can defeat me. All this kind of stuff. And then I'm like immediately humbled. I learned about myself this weekend that I have a trigger word. That trigger word is bootstrap. I definitely see the word bootstrap, and I just like, I definitely like go down a rabbit hole. Had somebody who like said something to me that was perfectly reasonable, perfectly rational, and I just saw the word bootstrap and just went off on a tangent. And then they like very politely, I thought, very nice of them, was like, I don't think you understood my comment. And then I reread the comment and I was like, I did not. They were using the word bootstrap in a like uh uh in like, yeah, you can bootstrap it, and that means that you can like, like hijack it and you can take it over, right? And then they had like a whole other thing, and I was like, bootstrap? That's not what we're talking about. It's not about lifting yourself up by your bootstraps. Yeah, embarrassing. I tried to save face because their point was really good. And then I think they just made the wise decision. We're just like, we're just not going to carry on. And they just like moved on. And I was like, yeah. So that was humbling, which was nice. My apologies to the people in question. I don't feel like I need to name names. But to the people who witnessed that. So that was fun. Gabriel, good to see you. Eric, good to see you. And then also just like this weekend felt very physically humbling. Like I'm trying to get myself back into physical shape, and I'm trying to do that, but I'm getting older. And I can feel it. I'm really feeling it in my hip, my right hip these days. So I'm doing everything I can. Just got back from the gym about an hour ago and did big leg day today. So I'm assuming that tomorrow and the next day I'm going to be limping around, which is good. It's good. I got to strengthen this hip because I'm going to turn into that 60-year-old guy who's going to have like a robot hip if I don't. So because I stand for maybe 10, 12 hours a day, when I'm at the capitalist job, and it sucks. It's butts. It hurts my feet, hurts my legs, makes me tired. No big surprise. These are the things we do to be able to justify paying rent, right? That's what we're all doing, right? We're all working these jobs so that we can say, "Hey, I should be able to live." Yeah, I'm going to stand and suffer, and it's going to be painful and everything's going to suck so that I can have food. That's great. And I'll admit, to not speak out of a place of ingratitude, um, that I'm in a better place than other working people of the past. So I think that's something I need to remind myself of. Joe, good to see you. Good to see you. That I'm quite grateful that the work that I do, people value me there. I'm treated well. Uh, uh, I am getting enough to pay my rent and to have a little bit of spending money on top of it. So I'm quite grateful because I take a look at my life and I compare it to others in the past especially, and I do have a better life, and I'm quite grateful for that. Then and it only inspires me further to continue the struggle and continue the fight and continue spreading around and continue organizing, because we can just continue advancing. We can just continue advancing. To mix up pace. I don't know how to pronounce your name, my man. Good to see you over on Twitch. Good to see you, XD. Isaac, good to see you. Eric's a full-blown libertarian now. Since Friedrich Hayek has proved that we don't need a planned economy, all we need is the free market. Climate change is a hoax. You better turn to God, you wretch. Sinner. Well, careful with that, Eric. I feel like the filter might pick you up. I know you're being sarcastic, bud, but... Yeah, Isaac, 90 billion to a Ukraine, Taiwan, Israel, zero for social spending. Not only that, that bill that you're referring to there, Isaac, carries with it a TikTok ban. Like, they're going to push this thing through. Like, it's going to happen. The TikTok ban for sure is going to happen. If they're putting into defense budget spending, like, once you see stuff manifest in defense budgets, that's when you know for sure it's going to happen. Because America doesn't give a shit about anything except war. Right? It's the only method it communicates about anything. It doesn't care about increasing social spending. It doesn't care about any of that. It cares about building a big and powerful military. The hilariousness, of course, being that, like, historically speaking, if you empower a big giant military, that military turns around and takes the society over. Right? Like, there just comes a point. Like, imagine if this whole Biden-Trump dynamic just continues, right? That it's just demented old men, insane fascists, just crazy bullshit coming out. Like, how much longer until the military just starts to say, you know, this would be better if we just took it over? Like, it would just be better. Like, yeah, it wouldn't be a democracy, okay, but, like, it would probably be more stable. It would probably be more sane. Right? Like, a military person could be like, well, we house people in barracks in the military and it's perfectly government funded. Like, we could just house people. Like, oh, some rich cocksucker somewhere is going to cry about it. Okay. Like, who gives a fuck? You know, there just comes a point where military personnel just start to think about this. Like, we could solve this. And it's not even coming from, like, a communist perspective or anything. It's just obvious. You know, this is one of the things I keep talking about on this channel, is that so much of what I say has just gotten obvious. Like, and it's going to be a matter, it's not going to be too much longer until, like, military personnel are just like, empty houses, people on streets. And they just do it. And if, like, a bunch of rich people show up to stop them, they'll just, like, boom, 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 and that'll be it. They'll just be like, yeah, get the fuck out of the way. Like, what are you even doing? And they won't profess any ideology. They'll just literally be like, people in street, go not in street. Like, it's so clear. And so if we just keep inflating the military and keep inflating the military and keep inflating the military, eventually the military will just take over. Right? Tumix says black LGBT and Black Lives Matters are freedom movements for freedom. It's a freedom movement, not communist. Yeah, I respect that. That's fine. It's I'm here to observe reality and talk about reality from a Marxist perspective, and I think that this is accurate. So it's fine. America is the enemy of countries who lack freedom, political and social unrest, and totalitarianism. What are you talking about? America is the enemy of countries who lack freedom? What a joke. Nobody upholds a lack of freedom more than America, right? America coups governments all across the planet. It's a total joke to believe that America is the enemy of countries who lack freedom. Like, what a total, like, like, observably falsifiable in the easiest possible way. Like, literally most countries across the planet at this point have been involved in some kind of military conflict with the United States, and the United States has overthrown governments all across the world, elected governments, socialist governments, right? Like, governments that are all about providing freedom for citizens, governments that are all about increasing the well-being of their citizens, right? But that's not why the United States operates the way it does. That America believes itself to be a supremacist state, right? Even if you don't believe in the white supremacist angle, like, manifest destiny is so obviously entrenched and enshrined in the way America thinks about itself, that it has the right to govern the world and the right to rule and the right to go into other people's countries and destroy them and steal from their citizens, right? Like, America has shown this over and over and over and over and over again. Yeah, and your comment, right? Middle East is swimming poor of dictatorship, Iraq. Right. Because America keeps putting dictators in positions of power. Like, you don't know anything about the history of these places. Like, straight up, dude. Like, if this is the commentary that's coming out of you, then you don't know what's going on. That you're actually trying to pretend as though what is happening in the world is America fighting back against the rise of dictatorships, and when it's America creating the dictatorships. That when you leave countries alone, most of them fall into a pattern of electing people to help them. That's what most people actually do. That's what most societies actually do, because it's completely rational and makes all the sense in the world. Most people want to live in a country that is pursuing policies of prosperity. Most people want to live in a country where their neighbors are doing well, where they go into establishments that are clean and well managed, where they feel like everybody is doing okay. They want to feel good about their society. They want to feel like they're on a path of growth and a path towards prosperity, right? That's how most people actually are in society. So if you leave them alone, they will eventually start supporting people who start saying, yeah, we need to get rid of this poverty, and we need to get rid of these terrible drug problems we have, and the conflicts that exist in our society. We should resolve these things, and a good way to resolve most of them is to ensure, first and foremost, that everybody has food and shelter, and everybody has access to basic necessities of life, right? That if you're living in a society that's loaded with poverty, and you try to just criminalize that poverty the way America does, you end up with an enormous prison system the way America has. But if you actually just provide food and shelter for everybody, suddenly all of your problems seem to kind of resolve themselves, because people aren't living in positions of total desperation. The trouble is, of course, that if you begin to actually do that as a society, right, if you, here in the world, right, if you begin to actually pursue those policies, and you begin to actually say, yeah, we should clothe our citizens, we should feed and shelter our citizens, we should make sure they have access to resources, we should make sure they have access to a decent quality of life. Well, what does America do? America comes in, bombs the place, supports far-right Nazi level like juntas and things like this, to overthrow the government. They install military dictatorships because the resources that country is using to help its own citizens should be extracted from those people and sent into the West for the benefit of Westerners. That's the American way. That's the American system. I think I'm just going to ban you, dude. You're obviously a very stupid person. Like, you're not actually engaging with the situation in a way that I can consider rational. And once you show that you're not interested in engaging in evidence, then you're not a rational person worth talking to. You're too stupid to talk to. And I use that in a technical way, right? I'm not trying to offend you. I'm trying to tell you you have a problem to overcome, and that problem is your own stupidity. So, go deal with that. Once people show you that they're stupid, that they're too stupid to talk to, just disengage with them. You don't need to tell them that they're stupid the way that I do, but just, there's no reason to move forward, right? Like, stupidity is a massive plague. We do everything we can to ensure that the populace is largely stupid, to ensure that people are too stupid to talk to and too stupid to address. We do everything we can in this society to make sure that that's the case. And so it's unfortunate. It's totally true, though, that once a person shows you that they're not interested in responding rationally, and they're not interested in looking at evidence, and they can't be convinced by seeing evidence, and they can't be convinced once they just reveal their stupidity to you, the best thing to do is to just pack up and leave. Right? Just dust this. Just dust yourself off. Just have a good day. Get the fuck out, because people who do not respond to evidence are too stupid to talk to. Joe, what are you saying to me here? Yeah, I hope cooler heads do prevail among the military. I mean, like, where's cooler heads? Where could they possibly be at this point? Right? Democrat brain. We've got Democrat damage over here. Yeah. No, I've got an article on that one, Dragon Fruit. Good to see you, by the way. Like, do I actually have the article, or was it just the clip I saw? Yeah, the Supreme Court's literally going to see if it can be criminalizing... come on, where is it? Oh, well. The Supreme Court is going to... Oh, yeah, here we go. I knew I had it. With homelessness on the rise, the Supreme Court weighs ban on sleeping indoors. Or outdoors, I should say. The Supreme Court wrestled with major questions about the growing issue of homelessness on Monday, as it considered whether cities can punish people for sleeping outside when shelter space is lacking. It's the most significant case before the High Court in decades on the issue, and comes as record numbers of people are without a permanent place to live in the United States. So if you make it a crime to sleep outdoors, while simultaneously not providing housing or purposefully withholding housing, what's the end result? Right? What's the end result? Well, you end up with a bunch of people in a prison system. That's what you end up with. That you have a privatized prison system that's looking forward to the criminalization of homelessness on this level, where you can just arrest someone for literally sleeping outdoors. Radio, good to see you, my man. Yeah, you'd think these psychotic assholes would just put two and two together and get everyone sheltered and fed. No, but that doesn't funnel into their idea. That doesn't funnel into their ideology. Right? Those people are in poverty and they're living on the streets because they deserve it. Right? Like, once you fall into the pattern, once you fall into the idea that gets perpetuated by capitalism and by the system of capital, that I'm a good person because I'm rich, right? It starts there. I have a lot of money, therefore I am a good person, and I am valid because of that, right? I don't need any further evidence. I don't need any further proof. I can just prove that I am a good person because I am rich. Well, once you make that conclusion, right, which is a religious ideology, but once you conclude that, then it's not a long, far skip and a jump to you're poor, therefore you're bad. Right? You're poor, therefore you're bad. And if you're living homeless in the streets, well, you got to get a better job, and you got to pull yourself up by your bootstraps, and you got to do all this stuff, right? You gotta work harder. And of course, there's no like analysis of, well, okay, you got to get a job. Well, who are you getting a job from? Well, you're getting a job from the ownership class. You're getting a job from the rich. And how do the rich become rich? By exploiting the poverty of the poor. Right? Because the poor are willing to accept lower wages and a lower standard of living and longer hours and worse benefits if it means that they get food and shelter, right? So the poorer you keep people, the richer you can get because the better you can exploit them. And that whole analysis doesn't exist. It's just, I'm rich, therefore I'm good. Look, God blessed me. Like, I have so much wealth. I obviously must be a good person because I'm so rich. Right? And this, forget about actually reading the book and finding out that God and Jesus are constantly like, give your money to the poor, right? Rich guys don't enter heaven. Like, give your money away. Yeah, skill issue. Should have chose better parents to be born with at the character creation screen. Yeah, just dead brain shit. Just explicitly fascist, right? And so, of course, like, the result of this, the solution, capitalist solutions are free market solutions, right? Chaos-based solutions. When you're looking for chaos-based solutions that result in maximum profits for people who are willing to exploit other people, right, for the benefit of themselves, you'll end up with an explosion of prisons across America. They'll spend billions and billions of dollars to increase prisons. You'll get huge prison subsidies because this is the solution that they're going to go for. Because it's going to make a bunch of people rich. Those people will be seen as good, right? It won't be too much longer until we'll have like a prison baron. We'll have like a prison billionaire. Jethro McGuffin, owner of the lockdown group, who specializes in owning private prisons across America, right? And Jethro will sit on some panel, and they'll, when he chimes in, they'll take what he says seriously, and he'll be the owner of private prison systems, and he'll say something like, "Oh yes, I was able to make an enormous amount of market share and make an enormous amount of wealth for myself when the Supreme Court finally banned homelessness. And, those homeless people, they got to go somewhere. And so they were getting arrested and they were getting thrown into prisons. And so I was able to leverage that demand in states across America and have them subsidize the building of enormous prison complexes, which then we created jobs and helped build the economy and spread prosperity into America, right? And right now we've got dozens and dozens of prisons being built across. Each one can house 1,000 prisoners, and those prisoners we get to use, we put them to work too, right? Like, they become laborers. They work for $3 a day. And we get to take advantage of their cheap labor, and Jethro will be talking this way, and people will be like, "Wow, what a great business strategy for Jethro! Wow, thank goodness for Jethro. He's creating jobs, he's a job creator." Yep. Meanwhile, he's like one of the most despicable people in the society, not even close, right? Like, he's literally a slaver, taking advantage of systemic slavery that's been built in the society. And this is a fictional person that I've just invented, but this guy's coming. Like, this guy's coming for sure. Joe writes, "What's sadder is how many working people buy into that antiquated ideology." Well, if you live in a vacuum, right? If you live in a vacuum, because humans are not really looking for what's real or true. They're looking to fit in. That's what humans are actually trying to do. It's a really basic survival strategy, right? That just fit in. Keep your head down. Don't make waves, right? Real basic. Most people don't have that idea of, I'm going to take over and I'm going to make a name for myself and all that. Not really. Like, that exists, obviously, but most people just want to fit in. Most people just want to not ruffle feathers, and most people just want to get on with living their lives, right? And so if there is a vacuum, right? If there's a spiritual, intellectual, or moral vacuum, and that vacuum is, of course, created by the system of capital, right? They're not going to promote ideas that are anti-capitalist. They're not going to make you think about the structure of the society or where you live. They're not going to make you do any of that. So it creates a vacuum, and when they fill that vacuum, that just becomes the popular way of thinking, because people want to fit in. Right? They want to know that the people who are around them think the way they think. And it isn't until a serious movement rises up and challenges that you start to see, who's actually interested in building a civil society, and who's just here to exploit and extract as much wealth as they possibly can for themselves. And huge groups of the society, huge sections of the society, are just here to extract as much as they can. That's it. That the entire society has structured itself to be an extractionist worldview. That workers don't view their work as building something on behalf of a society or on behalf of a generation, right? That I'm building this so that my sons can do X, or I'm building this so that my daughters can do X. I'm building this for the next generation. I'm building this, and that'll create like a long legacy. And I'm not even thinking about that. I'm literally just thinking, like, how do I extract as much wealth out of this entity that exists called a business that technically does provide a service? But how do I extract as much as I can from it before it eventually turns on me or I abandon it? Right? That's how most workers, I think about these things. Right? They're not thinking about these things from a position of building loyalty or long-term thinking, or even the idea that these institutions will be around for any longer than the owners are around. Right? Like, most businesses fall apart after the owner dies. Right? Or after it passes on to their son, and then their son sees a steady decline over time. And then usually there comes a point, and it's usually the son, right, where they just look around and they say, oh, I don't care about running this business that my dad built. I don't care about that. Like, it doesn't matter. I'm just going to sell it, right? And if that means breaking it apart, laying off a whole bunch of people, tearing it up, ripping it to pieces, turning it into a husk of what it was formerly, then they're going to do that. And so most of the society is just in a position of fight or flight constantly, where everybody knows that the institution that they're working in today is just going to fall apart. And so it's just about extraction. It's about just pulling out as much wealth as you possibly can for yourself. And so somebody standing up and saying, hey, we should look out for one another, and we should, like, that's a different way of thinking of things. Because right now, for most people, it is every man for themselves. Right? That is how most people look at the world right now. It's just every man for themselves. And, and it's going to pull the society apart. Like, it's going to pull everything apart. It's always the kid that fucks, as it was with the company my mom used to work at. I don't know if I understand your comment, XD, sorry. But I mean, we're seeing like major signs of a major pivot, right? Like a major pivot is happening in the society. Like where it's going beyond just anti-communist rhetoric. Like now we're seeing systemic changes that are systemically happening. Governor DeSantis signs a law requiring anti-communist education for all Florida K-12 students. We're seeing a similar thing happening here in Ontario, where the fascists that run the society are beginning to see that they can no longer maintain the stability of their fascist society as the worst elements are beginning to become obvious and are beginning to take over. And they're doing everything they can to create systemic structures to propagandize against their enemies, which is communist, right? Yeah, Ontario and Florida, vanguard fascists, it seems to be the case. Yeah, they're really afraid of communism again now. Yeah, I think that's right. Well, and I think it's especially true because people are beginning to see through their smokescreen in regards to China. That the China smokescreen has kind of worked for a little while, but it is falling apart. That the idea that China is rich and wealthy and prosperous because of capitalism instead of in spite of it. And the idea that the Chinese Communist Party aren't real communists, so say us Western capitalists, as if we're the ones that get to define what is or is not true communism. And it's starting to fail because, like, pointing at a place that's experiencing massive prosperity and enormous benefit for the citizens, and saying that that's capitalism, like, well, okay, so your very next question is, well, then why is that not happening for us? What's happening to us? Why is it that they have capitalism and it's failing, but we have capitalism, or sorry, they have capitalism and it's succeeding, but we have capitalism and it's failing? Why? And it's not a far skip and a jump to realize, oh, they're lying. Oh, yeah, okay. Because they constantly lie, and they're constantly lying, right? They're lying all the time. And so, of course, they're going to lie about communism. And so people are beginning to see more and more. And the energy is beginning to turn more and more. That communism is the way that we need to be moving towards. Right? June, good to see you. Do you remember a guy named Barnabas Coram? I think so. It's ringing a bell, June. Is that somebody who used to come in here like a year ago? I can't quite remember. I can't quite put my finger on it. It sounds familiar, though. AOC has apparently full-throated supported the $100 billion foreign military aid bill. She's cooked. May as well be a Bush. Yeah. No, you don't survive, right? You don't survive. Jack Chick style pamphlets about communism, spanned them everywhere, worked for the evangelicals. It's not exactly like the evangelicals got involved in the political system. That's what really happened. I don't think Jack Chick tracts were as responsible for that. Can you imagine? It turns out that the thing that really did change the history of America were Jack Chick style pamphlets. Like, that'd be crazy. Yeah, like 2-3 years ago. Yeah, I think I do remember this fella, and he was in the Discord for a little while, if I recall. If it's the fellow I remember. Yeah. Why? Why are you bringing it up? So let's... This story kicks me right in the teeth, man. I gotta tell you. This story kicks me right in the teeth. The U.S. government transfers nearly $2 billion in Bitcoin to Coinbase. Like, imagine burning fossil fuels. Imagine burning non-renewable resources. Imagine destroying, like tearing up the soil, tearing up the ground, tearing up life itself, ripping everything apart, and burning it so that you can maintain just like an invisible, non-existent, like measure of wealth and prosperity in a digital form. Like literally like video gaming your whole economy. Like, imagine actually thinking that this is a good idea. It's so stupid. And it's expanding. That's the part about it that I think is killing me, is that it's expanding. And it's becoming bigger, and it's becoming larger, and it's becoming a big giant situation. Like Like, when this stuff first showed up, it literally, the basis of it was Magic the Gathering cards. Like, and here it is, the United States government being heavily involved in this digital nonsense, in this creation of a currency, and basing huge sections of the economy on it. It's a terrible idea, right? It's a terrible idea. All the Dems voted for that bill. Yeah, of course they have to. You can't vote against military bills. Like, that's where that's the real society of the United States. Right? You can't like, in the United States, it's like voting, like it would be if we were living in a sane, rational society, it would be like if somebody voted against a Feed the Children bill, right? Like, in an actual civil society and in an actual real society that's actually attempting to grow and build itself, everybody would be like, yeah, feed children. Like, of course. You can't stand up against that. But we don't. We live in a crazy, fascist, ridiculous, collapsing society that's doing everything it can to ensure that it consumes itself. And so they're going to fund militarism. And it doesn't really matter what's even in the bill, right? It doesn't matter. Like, they're literally funding a world war. Like, they're funding a war in Ukraine. They're funding a war in Taiwan. They're funding a war in Israel. Like, the isolation is the only way forward with this. Like, straight up, the only thing that the entire rest of the world is going to be able to do, right, is withstand the absurdity of the United States empire, withstand its bombing, withstand its attacks, withstand its assaults, steadily push back against it, and just steadily isolate it. Don't trade with it, right? Don't allow it to have access to resources. The trouble is that the United States just recently found resources in Wisconsin, right? Huge sum of resources that they're definitely going to build like enormous military projects with. Like, the United States isn't an intelligent place. It's going to squander those resources on bombs for sure. CH writes, Bitcoin was rumored CIA psyop from day one. It's a trap. Cybercash was the original blind. The presidential system has way more privacy protection. Lance McKay, don't know if I've ever seen you here before, Lance. Good to see you. Whitney Webb breaks down this Bitcoin move. Moving towards coins for resources. Lots to unpack. Still interesting. It's only I don't think it's interesting, right? And I'll tell you exactly why I don't think it's interesting. Like, the only time I've spent any amount of time on the issue of Bitcoin or digital currencies or any of that kind of stuff, and like people start to get really like into it. And there's all this like gamesmanship that happens, and within a structure, like once you buy into the Bitcoin idea, once you buy into the concept of it, once you buy in, then there's all this intrigue and it's interesting and oh my goodness, and the blockchains and all this kind of stuff. But if you actually don't buy in, as I don't, right, you could see pretty cleanly that Bitcoin is a stupid idea. And it's a stupid idea for one very clear reason. We are burning non-renewable assets in order to maintain it, in order to keep it around. It's pointless. It achieves nothing. It builds nothing. It grows nothing. It has no capability to actually do anything, right? It's just literally like, I have high number, therefore good kind of thinking. I've got tons of Bitcoin. Look at how good I am. It's just a different type of sort of status building. And near as I can tell, the status of Bitcoin exists on how much pollution it can provide, how much destruction it can wrought, and how many resources you can waste in order to have it. It's like building a luxury resource and being proud of how wasteful it is. Like, Bitcoin is a measurement of human waste on the highest possible level. Instead of burning any of that energy or burning any of those resources or destroying any of those resources to help anybody, we're literally going to use those resources to have a little toy for us to tinker about. And if you want to tinker about with the toy, and if you want to look at the toy and spend all your time talking about the toy, I guess it's interesting. It's as toys go, but it's not like useful, and it doesn't achieve anything. And near as I can tell, it just wastes everything. Like, it's just hugely, hugely wasteful. Yeah, they compare prime loans to the Wall Street was into in the mid-2000s and how Wall Street manufactures hype for certain types of investment, shows the similarities to the new Bitcoin move. Yeah, like, they are salesmen, and they are looking for new ways to make wealth for themselves, right? And if they can, like, look, if they could hold their hand out to you and say, the more money you put into my hand is the more money that you're going to get back in 5 years, and that you gave them $5,000, right? And they closed their hand and walked away, and then you'd be like, hey, can I get my investment back? They'll just be like, no. Like, if they could do that, they would, right? Like, that's all this is at this point. It's just a system of salesmanship tactics leading to extraction and abandonment. Right? Their goal is to get as many people hooked onto as many ideas as possible, into as much money and as much kind of things going upwards towards them, with the promise that this will turn around and you'll see big prosperity and investment. It'll all trickle down this time. I promise. Right? And then they'll cut the cord and just abandon you. That's the goal. Like, that's the strategy. And that's what it's all about. It's not about anything else. Right? That getting caught up in the hype is believing a fraudulent liar who has lied to you fraudulently yet again. And that's going to be the result of all this Bitcoin stuff. That's going to be that's the bottom line on all of it. The more people that are invested in the Ponzi scheme, in the multi-level marketing scheme, the more people that are involved in this ridiculous scheme that exists for no reason, to inflate nothing important whatsoever, and that we waste a lot of resources in order to have around, the more people who are involved in it, well, the more people who will be hurt, and then the more wealth that will be extracted when they decide to cut the cord and just be like, oopsie dude, never existed in the first place, because guess what? It doesn't. It doesn't exist in any meaningful way. It doesn't actually achieve anything. It doesn't do anything. It's just a silly toy that we interact with and waste a lot of time on. And my advice is to just not get involved in it. Just don't participate in it. Because then when the whole system comes down, you'll just be able to observe it. Right? Because that's their goal, right? Their goal is to just get you... They want you to spend $10,000. They want you to take $10,000 and put it all into Bitcoin. Like, they want you to put $10 billion, $10 bagillion. If they could get Warren Buffett to spend all of his money and invest everything possible into Bitcoin, they would. They absolutely would, right? Because then they would be able to get those assets for themselves, and Warren Buffett would be poor, right? But Buffett's not a moron. Like, this is just 100% some weird little scam that's going on in the society that's getting hyped by salesmen, i.e. the very people who are going to benefit from the collapse. And it's going to collapse, right? It's going to collapse. Oh yeah, Warren Buffett has a new bookshelf on Twitch. Warren Buffett donated a lot of money for Ukraine. Yeah, of course, he's getting to the end of his life, and, you know, he wants to really reveal to everybody that he was a Nazi all along. Yeah, capitalism equals Lucy with the football. You equal Charlie Brown. For sure. For sure. This headline kills me, dude. This headline kills me. Tax evasion by millionaires and billionaires tops $150 billion a year. Just straight up, like, we're not paying taxes. Like, millionaires and billionaires just don't pay taxes. The taxes that they're supposed to pay. Forget about, like, all the tax breaks that they're getting. Forget about all the legislated kind of stuff. Billionaires top $150 billion a year. Like, the tax evasion. It's just ridiculous. What about RRSPs? Well, theoretically, RRSPs make sense, right? People pay into them, and then when they get old, they get that money back, right? Theoretically, that's the way it theoretically goes, theoretically. We'll see, right? We'll see. I'm not confident. I think that the society that we live in is going to do everything it can to eliminate Social Security. I think that once they actually start to need to pay it out, right, they're going to do everything they can. I think inflation is a big part of that, right? I think inflation is a big part of the destruction of Social Security, right? Like, oh, you only paid in $500 throughout the 70s, 80s, and 90s every so often, right? And now that $500 is only worth $2, right? Because of the way inflation works. So, no, I think that RRSPs, like, those sorts of investments make sense in stable societies, but we don't live in a stable society, right? Like, put money towards a thing, get payout later, right? Like, it makes sense in a stable society that's actually interested in building a stable future for you and your family. You don't live in a society that's interested in building a stable future for you and your family. That's over. That's been over for a while now. So that RRSP money is likely going to vanish, right? Like, that's my expectation for myself. I don't know what it's going to be like for the boomers or anything, but my expectation is I'm going to turn around and try to get anything out of a pension or RSP or some kind of thing that exists on the side, and it's just not going to be there. That's just my assumption, because we live in a society that's extracting as much wealth from us and then is going to turn around and abandon us. And it's doing it systemically at this point. And the people who are perpetuating these scams on us are being rewarded for it. Like, I've got an article right in front of you. Tax evasion by millionaires and billionaires tops $150 billion a year. Put them in jail. Jail them. Right? Don't fine them. Right? Don't pursue some kind of, like, financial thing where we're going to get a bunch of financial, all this kind of yabba yabba yabba. Jail them. Put them in jail. Arrest them. Make this a crime that they have to go to jail for. But we're not going to do that. Why? Because these are the owners of the society. And this is them just telling us how much they're abandoning us. Right? That we live in a society that has theoretically said, we pledge to promote the civil society by this dollar amount. And this is the structure of how we're going to build the civil society. And this is the wealthiest people in the society, i.e. the primary beneficiaries of the society, explicitly telling you, yeah, we don't give a fuck about what we said and what we promised. We don't give a fuck about that. We don't care if the civil society is destroyed around destroyed around you. We're getting $150 billion extra a year. Go fuck yourself. Right? So I don't see why that's going to be any different with the RRSPs. I don't see why that's going to be any different with Social Security, right? That when the time comes for us to collect, they're just going to be like, oopsie doo, nope, ha ha ha, TTT. Well, here's the MAID system. Oh, you having a tough time? Try the MAID system, right? Like, that's obviously what they're doing. Like, it's so clear and it's right in front of you. That you just need to brush away the smoke screen, right? You just need to brush away the obvious pro-capitalist propaganda that they've filled your brain with. And you can see it for clearly what it is. These people are psychopaths. They're obviously going to destroy us. That's their goal. Their stated agenda is to impoverish you and increase unemployment and to cause pain and despair wherever they go. They keep telling you that that's what they're doing. So I don't know why we should trust, like, oh yeah, you're going to take money from me and then definitely you're going to give it back. That's definitely happening. Long writes, Bitcoin is a harder asset than real estate? The value of a Bitcoin is based on a narrative, and narratives have unlimited value. Yeah, but when people realize that the Bitcoin has been overvalued, it doesn't have anything to fall back on. Real estate will always exist, right? The land will always be there, right? So real estate, I understand what you're saying, Long, and it's very fun, but in real terms, real estate is 100% a harder asset because it can't just vanish. It's not based on faith. Maybe the price of it is based on faith, but the asset will always remain. Right now, the Bitcoin ETFs are sucking in 10 times the daily production of Bitcoin. The demand for this asset is going to go through the roof. Yeah. And then it's all just going to collapse like a Ponzi scheme collapses because it's not doing anything. It's not based on anything. It's literally just fantasy. It reminds me of the Dutch tulip economic crash, right? Back in the 14th century, that Dutch tulips became the thing. And everybody wanted tulips. And everybody was just like, tulips, tulips, tulips. And people were willing to spend way overpriced to get access to tulips and strange tulips and new tulips and different types of tulips. And everybody was like, oh my God, tulips are the greatest thing ever. Oh my God. And people started to speculatively invest in future tulip crops. And so you had like tulip futures, right? And farmers, instead of growing grain and instead of growing wheat and instead of growing any food, started to just grow tulips. And you started to see this enormous tulip economy come up out of the ground. And everybody, and it was actually creating a food crisis for the Dutch. We're actually looking at a situation where people were growing so many tulips that nobody was growing food. And then finally legislators stood up in the parliament and said, what in the fuck are we doing? These are tulips. Yes, they look pretty. Sure. You can't eat them. You can't feed an army with them. You can't support a civil society with them. What are we fucking doing here? And everybody all at once, like the spell was broken. The hysteria vanished, and all at once the whole society went, oh yeah, Jesus, yeah, these are tulips. And the whole fucking economy collapsed. All of these future speculators lost everything. And the whole thing just went right into the toilet because everybody just went, oh yeah, you're right. And so we can get caught up in these hysterias, and Bitcoin is for sure one of these. For sure, like more obviously than tulips, because at least tulip is something you can hold. At least it's something that you can have in your hand, right? And it's going to collapse in exactly the same way. It's going to collapse in exactly the same way. That everyone's just going to suddenly recognize, like, oh yeah, this isn't food, this isn't shelter, this doesn't do anything, doesn't promote anything, it doesn't support anything. Literally a solar flare power outage wipes it out. Like, I would argue that in 500 years, the land will still exist. I would argue that, like, the ground will still be here. Maybe our perception of what ownership is and what it looks like, and our relationship to that land will have altered. I hope it does, because I find that we have a very perverse view of the land and a perverse view of reality. Uh, uh, but like, Bitcoin will exist? Will it? Why? Like, why? It's just made up bullshit. Like, maybe it'll exist as like a curiosity, right? It'll exist in like the databanks of something, right? Yeah, I just don't think you will successfully replace currency with this Bitcoin stuff. It can't be successful. Like, maybe if your power grid was purely renewable, right? Like if Bitcoin was run on servers that were powered by solar exclusively, and that was the system, then I'd be like, oh, okay, cool. Like, you want to create a digital currency, you want to create a digitized currency, and you want to have that on like a renewable network that's in this like renewable kind of way. Okay, sure. It's just another way to have currency. Fine. It's not what we're doing, right? It's not what we're doing. Bitcoin is being thought of as digital gold. Yeah, all stores of value are arbitrary, but the distinction that Bitcoin has, like, if you have a lump of gold, you're not burning oil to keep the lump of gold there, right? Like, maybe you burnt some oil and did some stuff to have the gold, right? You've got the gold. But once you have the gold, you don't need to continue burning resources to keep the gold alive, to keep the gold real, right? If you stop burning oil, the gold's not suddenly going to go and vanish into the ether, right? Like, that's why Bitcoin is so fucking stupid. Like, that's what it is that you have to maintain its existence through further waste. And that the older the coin becomes, the more wasteful it is. Because you have to burn more in order to maintain its existence. And it's also like this odd like power sink. Like, even if you did build like solar panels and had like a thing to, well, you could use these solar panels for literally anything else. For something that's like useful, that might actually achieve something. As opposed to just like funny money, like it's just nothing. Our conception of real estate may not exist. Yeah, that's true. Like, we might actually begin to realize that we're temporary life forms living in this land, and that we're here to steward and manage the land, not to dominate it and control it and to tear it apart. Haley writes on Twitch, "This is why I hate the social democratic. We need to raise taxes so we can get better social services thing." Yeah. Have half your taxes go to black projects, bullshit, and embezzlement. Also, boomer pensions that people under 40 will probably need to collect themselves. Yeah, I think that's pretty, yeah. I think that's pretty straightforward, Haley. Like, they're outright just telling you, doesn't matter if you raise their taxes, they're just not going to pay it, right? Yeah, we're going to raise their taxes 0.3% over 20 years. Okay, they're just not going to pay it. Here they are not paying it. And are they going to jail? Is there any repercussions for it? No. Right? Nobody's making them do it. What and what are they going to do? They're going to fine them? They're already not paying this. They're just not going to pay that. Right? What are you going to do? Right? Like, there's no punishment for these people. There's no repercussions. They can just do what they like. So raise the taxes. Raise the taxes 200%. Do it. They're just not going to pay it. How do we know? They're not doing it now. Long Defiant continues, all stores of value are arbitrary, correct. Some people buy gold to store value. Some people buy real estate. The narrative about Bitcoin is that it is a store value. Many people believe it. Yep. And those people are rubes. You have to expend resources to store and move gold. Gold depreciation is about 14% per year. Yeah, okay. Like, I'm not interested in arguing. Like, Bitcoin is exceptionally silly in this regard. Its very existence depends upon waste. Like, if you don't waste resources to have it than you don't have it. Like, it's yeah. Venezuela is going to start using a stable coin to receive payments from oil states, USDT. Yeah. I just think it's ridiculous. Like, I do. Like, maybe this makes me an old boomer guy. Maybe I'm going to be a 70-year-old guy and there'll be all these bitcoins and all this digital currency. I will never move from this position. Like, it's dumb. It's a silly thing to do. And we're doing it at the highest level. And I've stated my reasons for why I think it's perfectly silly. It's literally burning real things for fake things. Like, it's just silliness. It's waste it's like worshiping waste. It's like waste at the highest possible level. To achieve, I don't know what it even achieves. Like, why is it better than just trading? Like, what does it do even? What is it make, what is it helping anybody do? You know, it just looks like it's like this hype train that people are on. Look at a thing that we can do. And so we're doing it because we can, without actually pausing to think, like, why? To what benefit is this? How does this actually help us? Does this help us? Is it going to help us? I don't think it's going to. Has a New Bookshelf writes, do you think the U.S. will experience more attacks or political leadership from people who are disenfranchised? Yeah. Yeah, I think that's likely. Like, I think that the self-immolations that we've been seeing are the beginning of it. That we had Aaron Bushnell, who self-immolated over the Palestinian crisis. Now we have a Trump supporter who self-immolated himself because he perceives a coming economic collapse and wanted to warn people about it. And I think that that's the beginning. I think that people begin by self-immolation. That societies, it seems to be the case that societies choose acts of extraordinary self-violence before moving on to externalized violence. And so it is only a matter of time. Long Defiant. I'm the only one talking, so I guess you have to talk about Bitcoin forever. I mean, I guess, dude. I guess I'm here to respond to people's concerns, and if what they want to talk about is Bitcoin, then I guess I'm gonna be the guy. Like, man who leaked billionaires' tax returns to expose unfair system given 5 years in prison. Like, raise the taxes all you want. Do it. Doesn't matter, right? Like, guys like this are going to expose billionaires, and then they're the ones that are going to go to jail, right? So if you're this guy, right, and you see tax evasion by millionaires and billionaires tops $150 billion a year, well, I'm going to leak the tax returns to expose that, and you go to prison for 5 years. The billionaire who doesn't pay his taxes, he just keeps living his life. I feel like self-immolation might going to become cheapened. No, I don't think self-immolation is ever cheapened. I think that it's always a dramatic act. It's always something that is incredible. You might not agree with the things the person is saying, but you cannot deny their commitment to it. Like, self-immolation is also like an aspect of the suicide culture that has erected in America. That America lives in a suicide culture where suicide has become normal, and everybody kind of understands the desire for suicide. Right? Millennials very famously have like a whole black humor joking about suicide angle that they constantly pursue, right? That suicide is in the back of our heads. Lots of us are committing suicide. Suicide is like the number 2 or number 3 cause of death amongst people in my age cohort. So, like, people are committing suicide. We have a suicide culture. The corporate state tries to gloss it over by having, oh, we'll have a mental health. Let's talk. Let's do some mental health concerns. Yeah, we're really concerned about the mental health of our citizens. We really are, yeah. While we extract as much wealth as we possibly can and abandon them while causing a climate change apocalypse. We really care about their mental health, for sure we do. Yeah, get fucked. They get totally fucked. So I think that people are beginning to see that it's more powerful to commit suicide publicly and in dramatic ways than it is to commit suicide quietly in your room, right? And it's going to continue, and I don't think it's going to be cheapened. Like, we might become numb to it. Like, we became numb to school shootings, right? Like, we're all numb to school shootings. You hear about a school shooting, you're like, uh-huh, and you move on with your life, right? I don't have a dramatic reaction to a school shooting anymore. I don't get captured by it. I don't go on big investigations. I don't dig into who was the person that did the school shooting and who's responsible. How did this happen? Like, we know how it's happening. We know what's happening. We understand what's going on. It's not a mystery anymore, right? And we understand how we could stop it, and we know what we should do, and we just see that it's not happening, and we're just like, oh, okay. So the people who are responsible for preventing these sorts of things no longer are interested in it, and it's just not going to continue. And so it's just going to continue. And I think the same thing likely will happen with the self-immolation. That we'll just be like, yeah, okay, another one. Yeah, another one. Okay. Yeah, another one. Right. Yep. Like, but I do think that the people who are experiencing these things, like when a person experiences a school shooting or when a person experiences someone self-immolating in front of them, like, that's dramatic. Like, it's the most dramatic shit that's going to happen in your life, right? By a lot. It's like incredible. And so that will definitely have a ramification. It'll have a local ramification for sure. It's highly unlikely that the people who are experiencing this sort of stuff are going to feel that it's been cheapened. It's just our perspective. Like, my perspective of it is definitely, like, when I look at school shootings, I'm like, yep. Abandon your citizenry, give them a bunch of weapons, create social systems that are actively extracting wealth from them and actively dismantling them and destroying them, while simultaneously placing the blame on them, right? Individualizing their desperation and despair, and watch them turn against you. Yeah, like, that's very clearly what's happening. That the people who are going in and shooting up schools are like one step off of going to the parliament buildings and shooting the place up, right? It's just that they don't have an understanding of where power actually lies. They've only spent their whole life in this institution, and they view this institution as a negative institution because the institution exists to turn them into complacent cattle that exists to be completely fine with having their wealth extracted and their society destroyed. Right? That's the reason schools exist in America, is to create a complacency amongst the populace and create people who are just like, oh wow, they destroyed my whole community, but there's a Walmart, you know? Like, and so of course people are responding to it, and they lack the articulative skills, and they lack the perspective because they were never taught those things. Right? They were never taught Marxism. They were never taught anything that would help them communicate these emotions and communicate these ideas. And so when they turn against the society that's actively seeking to betray them, they go to the institutions that they're most familiar with to do it, and that would be schools, right? Because the schools have turned against us. The schools have turned against the teachers. The schools exist as an edifice of a capitalist model that no longer exists anymore. And the capitalists aren't really interested in reforming them. They're not really interested in spending time or resources to actually recalibrate them because their strategy is abandonment. And so they abandon the schools. And they say, well, yeah, buy a gun, right? Here's a safe room that we'll build into classrooms for children to get into, or whatever, a product. Here's a product to buy. But we're not actually going to deal with this situation because we don't care. Like, we're capitalists. We've already abandoned you. Now we're just watching the outcome of that abandonment. Right? And yeah, here's Taylor Swift. Haha. Oh, at the Super Bowl. Wow, didn't she love that guy? Yeah. Like, it's just a total farce, and it's a total fraud, and we're supposed to spend any amount of time looking at it. It's crazy. Yeah, there was a secret report leaked from the RCMP in Canada that basically outlined how they expect an uprising as more and more people can't afford food and shelter. Yep. Yeah, of course they should expect it, right? They're the ones causing it. Like, not the RCMP directly. Jib Jabby, good to see you, my man. Hope you're doing well out there in the world, Jib Jabby. One of these days we will actually be able to talk to one another. Hope you're doing well, bud. Give an opportunity to say like, share, subscribe. Hit the bells, hit the whistles. We're at the top of the hour. Make sure you tell people I exist. Please consider donating to my Patreon. Even $1 helps. It's very lovely. But more importantly than that, yeah, tell people I exist. Spread the good word. Spread the gospel. Oh, the life being in boxes. Jib Jabby. I used to move on average once every 8 months. That was throughout my 20s and my 30s. I was moving once every 8 months on average. And it wasn't until I finally got into this place that I was just like, I'm not moving again. You'll have to really convince me to do another move out of this place because I'm exhausted with it. I'm tired. And the living life in boxes moment is very, that's a tricky moment. You got to kind of accept some stuff. Well, hope the move goes well for you, my man. Hope you're not moving too far. Yeah, they're in a rush to ban legal gun ownership. If they're that committed to the cause, why not take a politician or billionaire with them? That would make a much bigger impact. I think it's also like, what's doable? Like people who are going into schools and shooting them up are not sitting there with big maps and plans, right? That it's emotional. It's emotional. People are lashing out in emotion. They're not strategizing. They're not in a place of strategy. And if they are strategizing, it's just like on a very low tactical level of I'll go into this entrance and do like. Oh, I was referring to Bushnell. In Bushnell's case, I mean, I think there's a moral high ground, right? That it's already difficult to defend Aaron Bushnell as being like sane and rational, right? People already want to dismiss him because his act is so outrageous and so incredible that people want to put him into this camp of like he's a lunatic, he's had mental health issues, all this kind of stuff. So if you're also like violent and like shooting other people before doing it, it diminishes the act, I think, and I think that if you want to stand there and do that kind of thing, right, and make the kind of statement that you want to make, then shooting people up first, I think that's what the story would be. That your self-immolation would be ignored, primarily, and the primary message of what it is you were trying to say would disappear. That the headline is military man kills whoever. That's the headline. Oh, we got a debate about Bitcoin now. We got a debate in the chat about Bitcoin. Let's go. In the USA, they'll just prosecute whoever has the most Russian name. That's hilarious, dude. This is a story that seems to be circulating back around, and so I want to talk about it. And I've been, I saw this video maybe about a year ago, maybe a little while ago. For whatever reason, it's circling back. Or maybe this is a new millionaire that did this. I saw way back, like a year ago, a guy do something similar to this, where he makes himself homeless, and millionaire who made himself homeless and broke on purpose to prove he could make $1 million in 12 months for YouTube clicks, quits his bizarre social experiment over health concerns. Didn't make it to $1 million, even close. He didn't even make it to $100,000. I don't think he even made it to $50,000. Turns out being homeless is hard. Turns out it's difficult to do, right? Turns out being confronted with a system that generates poverty and keeps people in poverty is tough for someone to get out of. And we've got Mike Black, right? Mike Black actually saying to everybody, I'm super smart and incredible and clever, and I can just pull myself up by my bootstraps and use my incredible knowledge and intelligence in order to become a millionaire again, even if I'm homeless. And he gives up, goes back to his millions. Right? Why? Because it turns out that he was an idiot and a dum-dum. Not smart. Not a good choice, Mike Black. Hopefully what he walks away with is a little bit of wisdom, a little bit of intelligence, right? Luke on Twitch writes, Australian laughing in gun control, having no guns available to the general public without strict regulation. It's great. I mean, I'm a everything in moderation kind of a guy. Like, I think that if Australia was experiencing the extremities of abandonment that America is experiencing, you would have similar outcomes. I think that that's definitely the truth. Yeah, liberal alert. It is kind of a liberal thing to say. Like, Australia did not experience the major negatives of the 2008 financial collapse. Australia was largely insulated from that because of their trade relationship with China. That it's funny to watch Australia on the world stage right now because Australia is so obviously linked to China economically, and their best friend should be China. Like, Australia and China should be buddies, and it's so obvious that that's the case. Like, you guys are neighbors. Like, you're right there. And it would be easy for Australia and China to buddy up. But the problem is that Australians are the cousins of British and American fascists and feel culturally connected and feel culturally linked to this sort of old guard, white Westerners, right? You're part of the Commonwealth, for example. And so there's resistance to that. There's resistance to the idea that Australia should become more ingrained and more linked with China, even though it's outright been of a benefit to the Australian people. Like, Australia has been governed largely by neoliberals for the same amount of time as the rest of us. It's just that those neoliberals have been able to maintain a certain level of prosperity and haven't fully entered the period of extraction quite yet. And it's 100% because of their relationship with China. The capitalists in Australia will begin to act like the capitalists throughout the rest of the West. And that will result in an internal conversation that happens in Australia. And I hope that that internal conversation begins to say, hey, the Chinese communists are doing really well by their citizens, and our capitalists are beginning to act like lunatics. Maybe we should get rid of these capitalists and start following the communist line. What do you think? And that'll encourage people to more readily follow suit. Because I think, like, that's Australia's trajectory. Like, Australia, like, I don't know why it even tries to buddy up to the West anymore. Like, it seems like such a bad fucking idea. Especially as the West completely implodes. We have a fellow Sweet Leaf. The schools are having a problem now because making grade school children wave a pride flag or having private consult with their teacher to decide if they're trans is proving problematic. Honestly, Sweet Leaf, like, it's such a small scale issue that it's sort of weird that people talk about it. Like the quote unquote trans issue, right? It affects like 1% of the populace, right? It's not this big, crazy thing. And the idea that we're hyper focusing on this hysteria surrounding trans people instead of like talking about poverty and like poverty exists as a major issue throughout the school system. Like, there are teachers that live in poverty. There are children obviously living in poverty, right? Everybody is really struggling in America, and you can really see it in the American school system. Like, thank you, Just Me. It affects 0.1% of the population, like not even a percentage, and yet we're gonna like hyper focus on it, right? Uh, so I think that I can, from what I've seen in your commentary here, I could pretty safely say that what's happening is you've got some pretty serious transphobic issues going on, where you're like hyper focusing on this particular issue because your bigotry is getting in the way of your rational thinking. Like, I think that's pretty clear, because like it's such a non-issue. Like it's almost nothing, right? Like, how hard is it to just be like, yeah, trans people exist and they're dealing with some stuff, and I don't know why I should involve myself in the thing that they're dealing with, so they're going to deal with it. You know, I'm going to get on with my life. And I don't understand why anybody would take any other position than that. Like, no, by saying get it out of schools, you're saying get trans people out of schools. Like, you're making it this major issue that it doesn't need to be at all. Like 0%. Like, it makes sense that you might grumble about this with people at like a bar, right? You know, as people do. But like, to turn it into this big political thing and to make it like a major political issue is creepy and very weird, I think. Right, because those are people. They're people, right? Human beings should be permitted to be alive. And when they exist in society as living creatures that exist, right, and they have concerns or needs, right, well, we should help them with the needs that they have, right? But what I'm saying is that I don't know why you give a shit about it, right? Like, a human being, like, for example, women, right? Women have menstrual cycles, right? But imagine if I said get tampons out of schools, right? Get menstruation out of schools, right? That would sound very dumb. It'd be a very stupid way to interact with the world, right? And so trans people have issues, right? That they would like health professionals and teachers and educators to be aware of for the 0.1% of the time that it matters, right? But why do you care? Why do you care? Because it's such an obvious left-wing ploy, and you are a liberal. What's the ploy? Yeah, great question, Haley. What's the ploy? Like, what is it I'm trying to achieve? What is it I'm trying to gain? Like, what is it that I'm trying to make happen? With saying trans people are people and deserve to have their needs as trans people accommodated in a society that professes to want to see all of its citizens succeed. And with, again, saying, what, I don't know why you care. Like, that's the part about it that's so odd. Yeah, Joe's exactly right. Yeah, and just me too. It's echoes of Panic from the 80s and the 90s. And I think it is the system of capital really heightening it, creating a hysteria so that nobody will actually focus on the system of capital. Like, if you're wasting all your time hyper-focusing on an issue that doesn't affect you, right, then you're definitely not fighting against a group of people that are actively impoverishing you, right? It's just somebody getting caught up. Cultural division. My man, if you have a problem with the existence of a minority group, especially like one that's in a minority of a minority, right? 0.1% of the populace. If you are the one who is bringing up those issues and are creating a major hysteria and a moral panic about those issues, then the one who is engaging in cultural division is you. By a lot. By a significant amount. Because you're the one that's saying we need to have a pure society. Like, what you're engaging in is bigotry at the highest possible level. Yeah, transgender children are impoverishing me? What are you talking about? Like this is a moral panic. This is a hysteria that I'm seeing that's not rooted in anything rational, right? Like, how does the existence of a trans person affect you at all? Like for real. Like, actually think about that for a minute. Like, try to get through your moral panic. Try to find out where that moral panic is coming from and where that hysteria is coming from, and send that energy up into your brain, right? Because I don't fully understand where this one comes from. Like, why are you threatened? Why are you afraid? Why are you scared? Because that's the only real reason why anybody would act the way that you're acting, right? Like, this story that you're laying, I'm going to read this so that the people at YouTube can hear it, and so that we can really get a sense on, like, the kind of level of hysteria that we're dealing with. You're doing us all a real favor here by really illustrating the hysteria that trans people are dealing with, and that other minority groups have dealt with in the past, right? And we have trans people in the YouTube chat, right, who are longtime viewers and longtime contributors and good people who are doing their best and trying to survive in a society that's full of bigots and transphobes who are stirring up a moral panic. And they're the ones that really need to deal with it on the day by day. And so comments like this really illustrate the hysteria and really illustrate the lack of rational thought that's going into this conversation. Everyone gangster until some straggly bearded guy is going in behind their kid at a public pool because they told the person at the front desk they identify as a woman that day. So, like, the trans people are pedophiles line is bigotry at the highest possible level. It's the same thing that happened to people of color. It's the same people that happened to Mexicans, right? Mexicans are rapists. Donald Trump said that. It's the same thing that white supremacists do to minority groups, is they try to link their existence to something that we all agree is illegitimate, right? So in your case, you're linking pedophilia to trans people, as if trans people are naturally, normally pedophilic. And also your example kind of indicates a level of stupidity. Like a person who is like a straggly bearded guy doesn't need to tell anybody about their sex to get into a public pool. It's a public pool, my man. Right? Like, if a pedophile wants to harass a child in a public pool, he's going to do it, whether or not he says he's a trans person or not, right? Like, so your insistence that trans people are pedophiles really shows me that you're not thinking about this rationally, right? Really shows me that you're in a very heightened state of hysteria and your emotions have taken over your conscious, and you haven't actually thought about this. How are you going to stop anyone? Okay, let's read the full comment. It doesn't work. I'm not linking it, but how are you going to stop anyone from identifying as trans? It's a public pool, but now you can get into a woman's washroom. How are you going to stop anyone from identifying as trans? You don't. They identify as trans, right? Like, do you think that it's literally just somebody goes, I identify as a woman now? Like, it's like a Steven Crowder skit? Or like this stupid movie that the Daily Wire did, Ladyballs, that all it takes is just put on a wig and you're a woman now? Like, is that really what you think is going on? Like, you from the inception of your thinking of trans people begins a creepy person wants to do something illegitimate to someone. That's the beginning of your thinking. That's the start of your thought pattern. Right? So you begin thinking about trans people by saying they're despicable, low-life scum that I should be able to abuse and destroy. From the outset, that's how you think about trans people. You don't think about a person who is actually living as a trans person. You don't think about a trans person. And most importantly, and I need to say this again, you just don't go, oh, what a strange, unusual thing that I don't have to deal with. Oh, well, they do. Well, off to live my life. Because it doesn't matter to you, and it doesn't affect you at all. Right? You're caught in a hysteria. You're caught in this emotional, heightened hysteria where you can't, like, everything needs to be about this. Like, you came into this channel and immediately started dropping anti-trans rhetoric. You live in a hysteria. Like, you're not emotionally stable. Right? Like, right? Like, it's kind of like this, actually. Right? Read the comic right in front of you, except at the bottom it's, hello, I'm a trans person. I just want to work hard to feed my family. Quit ruining my life, you selfish bastards. Meanwhile, the Federal Reserve is screwing you over, the banks are screwing you over, the government's screwing you over. Right? And you're in here talking about 0.1% of the population that it has no effect on you at all. Nothing. Literally nothing. Like, leave these people alone. Like, just stop thinking about them. Because they don't they don't matter to you. You guys got to listen to this, man. This is crazy. I don't know. Like, I don't know what to say anymore. Yeah. Sweetleaf writes, get the cavity in your body and commit to it. Nobody has to see the opposite genitalia in their washroom as a kid. Fuck them. But you love it. You need the progressive left to prop your arguments up because alone they're fucking stupid. But you don't know anything. Right? You get, like, this is what's so funny about your position is, like, you're getting all bound up about something that doesn't matter or affect you at all. You're talking about this issue, and likely you have no idea what my position is on anything, right? Like, you are likely a deeply illiterate, not intelligent person, because it's so easy to get you caught up in something that doesn't matter to you, right? That doesn't affect you at all. And you don't know anything about what I stand for. You don't know anything about me. You don't know anything about my position. But if you can make the types of suggestions that you make about trans people, then you can do it to anybody. And so you're doing it to me. It's anti-intellectualism. It's stupid. It's emotionally hysterical. And it really just shows everybody around you a lack of just basic sense. Like, do you go around grumbling about trans people all the time? Because everybody you do it to thinks you're dumb, right? Like, it's not a smart thing to do. Because it doesn't matter. Like, it has no impact on anybody. Like, the people who it's having an impact on are the trans people, the minority group, who are just trying to live their life and are just trying to exist in the society. Right, but even this comment, Sweetleaf continues, adults can do whatever they want. Leave the kids alone. Like, what are you talking about even? It's this constant implication that trans people are harming children. So if a trans person is just standing in a room and there are children in that room, is the trans person harming the children just by existing in that room with them? Like, this is just a deeply, deeply... Yeah, like, and like, again, I think Joe's bringing it up. What does this matter to you? Why does this matter? Why is this the thing? What is it to you? Why is this impacting you? Where in your body do you feel this emotion? Like, I'm not asking that rhetorically. Like, where in your body do you feel this emotion? Is it rage? Is it disgust? Like, what is it? Because it's overwhelming your senses, and it's making you a pretty bleak, dark person. Like, I wouldn't want to spend any time with anybody who is talking the way that you're talking. Because if you can talk that way about these people, then you'll talk this way about me. For sure. Right? Like, I imagine it's very difficult to have friends. Like, Sweetleaf continues, if they've got their cock out in a female change room, right? Like, it's just a sign of total immaturity. Because you can only perceive having male genitalia out in a sexual fashion. Right? Likely because you view women as sexual objects. Right? That when you're a grown-up, like when you're an adult and you have maturity, you just understand, like, this is just kind of how it is. And likely a trans person, understanding that people with your mindset are around, they're going to go change in private. Right? Like, they'll go into the female change room and then they'll go into a stall. Specifically to avoid people like you. Right? And so they don't have their cock out in a change room because trans people are smarter than you. By a lot. Like, you're acting as though they're going to get changed and, like, walk around a change room gallivanting, being like, I'm the Queen of Estonia! Right? When the level of disgust and disgrace and violence that you display towards them is likely also going to be displayed by others, and so they just sequester themselves and then go into a separate area, right? That maybe a trans woman would go into a women's changing room, but then they would go into a stall, right? To avoid you. And, like, it continues, why shouldn't they? Trans women are women and trans men are men. Right, but you exist, right? Close-minded, short-sighted, emotionally hysterical, stupid people like you exist. So they want to avoid you because you're not a good person and you treat them poorly for no reason because they exist. Like, you assume that they're pedophiles and that they're there to do something wrong. So of course they're going to act like you exist because you exist, and you're likely going to treat them poorly. Haley continues, is that comment directed at priests and pastors? Isn't that fun? We can have, like, a whole pedophile cult get revealed in the Catholic Church. Jeffrey Epstein's pedophile island exists, right? We've got huge stories of just sexual abuse of children just pouring out of religious institutions and capitalist institutions, and this guy's concerned about trans people. Like, it's wild to watch. And there's actually, I think there's something true to what you've just written there, CH, right? Transphobes are themselves trans. I don't think that's as true on a, like, one-to-one level. But it did seem to bear out during the gay rights movement throughout the 90s. There were, like, huge anti-gay advocates and huge groups of people who were just like, we need to have camps and send kids to camps. And the people who are running the camps, and, like, they come out and it turns out that they're gay. Like, the people who were the most vocal and the most willing to put down the time and the effort to fight, it turns out that they themselves are gay. And I wouldn't be too surprised if there is an element of that. Like, I know for myself, when I witnessed the shift that happened, and there was 100% of shit. I'm from a small town, Manitoba, conservative town, right? And there was a shift. There was a shift in the way people viewed gay people, that we, like everybody else across Canada and the United States, were anti-gay. I was outspoken against the gay community because of my religious upbringing, and I would fight against gay rights and all that kind of stuff. And it wasn't until I went to university that I kind of shook that off. And I think it really did boil down to, for myself and everybody else around me, it boiled down to us straight white men especially, right? But white women were involved in it too, but it was mainly straight white men. Looking in the mirror and finally just asking themselves the question, am I gay? And honestly asking the question. And a lot of alcohol is involved for a lot of these guys, I'm sure of it. And most men went, no, I'm not gay, right? And then they would think to themselves, well, would it matter if I was? What would that change? And a lot of these guys like started to put themselves in the shoe of a gay man, being like, oh, it's just something they've got. They're just gay. That's what it is. They're not choosing to be gay. They're not trying to do anything bad. Right? They're not trying to rape me, right? Like, they're not trying to do that shit. They're just a person that exists that happens to be attracted to members of the same sex, and here they are. Oh, and that could be me, right? And the moment that people went through that bit of journey where they asked themselves if they were gay, and they said, no, I'm not gay, but you know what? I could be gay, and all these sorts of stuff, and they got through it, then the whole thing shifted. And the population pivoted and started to recognize that, like, yeah, gay people are fucking harmless. Like, they're not going to do anything, right? But for some reason, the trans conversation is now back into that spot. And I think that it's harder for people to grapple with is why. Because when they look in the mirror and they go, am I trans? It's like, well, what does that even mean, really? Like, you got to confront what it is to be a man and what it is to be a woman, and talk about masculinity and understand there's biological sex, and then there's gender, and there's all of this kind of stuff. And in a lot of cases, it basically just boils down to, like, somebody who has male genitalia has a sense of themselves as a more feminine person and would like to project themselves in that way. And, like, there's also the reality that, like, the biological, it's not as simple as XXXY. Like, it isn't that simple. There's a huge amount of biological change and gradients that can happen within that create, like, that's where hermaphrodites come from, right? And that's and these people exist in the society. They don't exist in, like, an enormous, like, 500 billion of them, right? Like, they're small, which is why it's shocking to watch anybody give a shit about them, right? On this scale. Like, it's just sort of wild to watch. And so I don't know how the transphobes are actually going to get through it. Because I think going from being a homophobe to not being a homophobe ended up being as easy as being like, well, am I gay? No. I guess I could have been gay, but I'm not. Okay, well, they're not trying to have sex with me, so I don't understand why I care about this. I'm going to move on with my life. Whereas a transphobe, it's like, you got to look and be like, am I, well, I've always thought of myself as a man. Am I a girl? Do I think I'm a girl? Well, no, I don't think I'm a girl. Right? I mean, I do like the soft, I like the soft touch of lace on my skin at night. I tell you what, though, does that make me a trans person? Like, people get really up in their ass about a lot of this stuff, like a lot of this stuff, and really, what's actually going to happen is people will just stop talking about it because it doesn't matter to them as much as it, like, for every, like, literally it is for every 1,000 people, there's one trans person. Like, it's just so small scale. Yeah, that's a silly thing to say, Sweet Leaf. How is someone who is in the wrong body get diagnosed by a fucking grade school teacher upper ass on Twitter? Yeah, source, I made it up. That sounds like some made up nonsense. Like, there is an enormous amount of pushback when somebody comes out as trans. There is an enormous amount of pushback. There's an enormous amount of pushback from the teachers. There's an enormous amount of pushback from the parents, certainly. Like, if you take any amount of time and actually listen to the experience trans people actually have, which you don't, because you don't know anything about them, because you're so, like, if you did know something about them, you wouldn't be so offensively bigoted, right? If you just listen to the stories of parents and teachers and the people who grew up trans and who became trans, like, it's not It's not a flip of the switch. It's not this thing where like you're talking about it like there's this massive conspiracy going on. A conspiracy to what end? For what purpose? To do what? Who knows? Cultural division. Okay. Because just existing is culturally divisive to you. Got it. Uh, uh, and so you've created this fake narrative. This just like totally false nonsense narrative that doesn't make any sense at all. And like exists in like a cartoon kind of way. Right? Which is the only way that somebody can actually maintain this type of bigotry. Right? It's just made up. The conspiracy is that the liberals ran out of progressive movements. Like, my man, I'm not a liberal. Like, you get that? Like, you understand that? Like, I have heavy critiques for liberals. Mainly that liberals and conservatives are allies that work together to maintain the system of capital, which is the thing you should actually be concerned about. Like, really the only reason I'm still talking to you is because I find you fascinating. Like, I just don't understand why you care. Like, that's the thing. Like, I can completely understand someone not understanding. That makes sense to me, right? And I can even admit to myself that I don't fully understand, like, the trans experience, right? Because it's not my experience. I'm not having that experience. I can kind of get into the abstract space and I can just imagine, like, myself, but, like, as a woman, like the woman version of John, and, like, exist kind of abstractly like that. But I can't carry that into my life. You know, I can sort of exist in an imaginative way, in that kind of way. And in an effort to like try to find compassion or empathy for those who are having that experience. But at the end of the day, I think that the best thing that anybody not having that experience can have is just to go like, well, I don't understand it. I'm not actually ever going to like understand. Like, that's not happening. But I can acknowledge that, like, well, that's a real, obviously that's a real experience that this person is really having, obviously. Like, that's obvious. Like, it'd be insane to not say that it's obvious. Obviously happening to them. And then just go, okay, like, I wish you well. I support you. Let's go get a drink. Hey, all the friends are going out. You want to come along? Right? And to just mainly not be a creep about it. Like, not be a weirdo about it. You know? Like, that to me is like the best thing that any person who feels another group is offensive to them or any of that kind of stuff could do, is to just not be a creep about it. Like, even if you believed these things, even if you actually held on to them in your heart and you were sitting there being like, black person, grumble, grumble, gay person, grumble, grumble, trans person, grumble, 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 grumble. Like, even if you had that in your heart, right, just take the lesson of, like, keep your mouth shut and, like, don't be a weirdo about it. And, like, if you and your work group are going out to an event or something, well, make sure you invite that person along. Grumble, grumble, grumble. Yeah, keep it to yourself. That's fine. Right? That's fine. It's not it's because it's such a self-defeating idea. It's such a self-defeating thing. And you keep saying, like, leave the kids alone. How would that be possible? Exactly. Right? Like if a kid came out as gay when he was 6 or 10 or 14 or whenever, should we leave the kids alone? Like, what are you even talking about? See, when you say leave the kids alone, what your implication is that trans people exist only because they're groomed to be such. That it's that trans groomer mindset that people like you who get caught in these hysterias believe, even though they're complete nonsense, while ignoring giant institutions that absolutely do groom pedophile cults, like the Catholic Church, for example. No, it's the trans people because they have a video on YouTube. That's the threat. And it's such total, overwhelming nonsense. Right? Like, yeah, like, they need to be made to feel they're in the wrong body. It's just nonsense. Like, it's just overwhelmingly nonsensical on the face of it. See-through and transparent. It's obvious you're just a bigot, right? Like, what do you think is more like, what do you think is more accurate? What do you think aligns more closely to reality, right? Uh, uh, do you think that there is a unseen, unknown conspiracy of people you don't know and can't name to infect the minds of children with the concept that they may be that they're trans, in order to build up the concept of transness for no reason at all? There's no outcome to this. Like, nobody benefits with this, but this is the conspiracy that you're putting in front of us. That liberals are trying to promote transness and are turning kids trans for no reason whatsoever except cultural division. Or do you think it's more possible that there is a natural phenomenon that you are unaware of, that you are afraid of? Which one of those two do you actually think is the more likely to actually exist in the world in a real way? Because I'm going to tell you, if the thing that you were describing was a real thing, it would be more obvious. Like, there would be like thousands of people involved in that conspiracy. It would be very obvious, right? Just because like morons like Shapiro or Tim Pool say that, oh, it's a conspiracy, it doesn't make it true, right? It's just sort of a lunatic fringe sort of stuff. Natural development without chemical intervention. So kids who have diabetes should not have insulin, right? Natural development, no intervention, right? Even if we can show that it dramatically improves the quality of life of the people who experience it, very clearly, in like a one-to-one kind of way, right? It shouldn't be done, because even though it's super helpful, it offends a bigot. Got you. Yeah, and Justin Trudeau doesn't give a fuck about BLM, Pride, Ukraine, Indigenous, trans kids. Right. None of us believe that he does. We're not liberals. Like, do you know what communism is, my man? Like, do you know what it is? Do you know who Karl Marx was? Do you know what communism is? Like, I think that you're just like caught in a bubble. You're caught in a bubble of what we have to, I guess, technically call intellectual thought. And that bubble probably includes, if I'm not mistaken, like Steven Crowder, Ben Shapiro, Jordan Peterson, right? Daily Wire, right? Probably includes a lot of that kind of media personalities. Alex Jones, right? Joe Rogan, when you're feeling like you want to pretend like you're a moderate. Like, that your media diet is largely listening to illiterate rubes talk about subjects they don't know anything about, while ignoring the actual experts who actually do talk about these issues from a position of expertise and knowledge, right? And that you're caught in this intellectual bubble that you can't imagine there's anything outside of it. You can't imagine that there are different modes of thinking. You can't imagine that there's something outside of it. And so everything just has to come down to conservative versus liberal, even though conservatives and liberals are obviously allies that work together against you to keep you fighting about trans people instead of fighting capitalists who actually own you, literally own you, right? That you go to work every single day for capitalists who extract as much value as they can from you and pay you barely enough to pay your wages, to pay your rent. And many of us don't. We work 2 jobs in order to do it. And you're complaining about the existence of a trans person. Yeah, I think Joe's right. He loves the masters. Like, that's the thing about fascists, right? They're weak, right? They're weak. They're fundamentally weak people, right? They keep telling this game about, like, you need to stand up on your own initiative and use your own authority and use your own power and all this kind of stuff. It's very fascist rhetoric, but at the end, they're just pathetic and weak. They just bend the knee and subserviate themselves to whoever they perceive as the strongest. And it's just that weakness that it's just so, like, you don't want to actually have a sense of self or a sense of your own self-confidence, right? You don't want to say anything and stand up on your own 2 feet and be confident about the things that you say. No, you want to just submit to weak idiots who are essentially just bigots. It's pretty incredible. There will be furries who want to be genetically fused with living bear suit and go shit in the woods. I mean, there's that dog general. You guys remember this guy? You guys remember, like, what do you call himself? The dog general pup play. This guy was hilarious, man. The exist are who was this guy? No, I don't. Army investigating officers for posting puppy play content online. Two service members were identified by whistleblowers: Colonel Brian T. Donnelly, aka Pup Ravage, Captain Dayton Tenney, also known as Adjunct Pup. Like, oh, now you want to pivot. Well, if you want to get into that conversation, mate, let's just start with what's obviously true. You don't know anything about the subject, right? Like, it's so obviously true that you don't know anything about what's going on in Israel, right? Like, if you're going to waste so much time on trans people, right? If you're going to waste that much time on trans people, then you obviously are not going to actually know what's going on in Israel, right? Which like, puts you out of step with the majority of the population widely, right? Like, it's a very old view that Israel has the right to defend itself and Israel is a free nation of support and blah blah blah. When it's obviously a settler colonial project, right? Like, that's obviously what it is. Like yeah, hold on, this is the thing, right? Like, people like you would have just said of Christ when he was crucified, he should have just obeyed the law, right? Bootlickers during the Boston Tea Party. Hey, bro, just comply with the redcoats. Bootlickers during slavery. If you don't like it, move somewhere else. Bootlickers during the Holocaust. Just do what they say and you won't get hurt. Right? Bootlickers today. Israel has the right to defend itself, even though it's very clearly and very cleanly, right, a settler colonial project. That the United States military, the British military, it started with the British Empire and then got transferred over to the American Empire, but it's mainly the same force, it's the same energy, it's the same thing, are attempting to create a gigantic military base that they call Israel in the state of Palestine, right? And it's been going on since, like, the 1800s, the late 1800s. Like, we've got the Prime Minister of Israel talking about it. The first Prime Minister Ben Gurion talking about it. We've got the Emperor of the Ottoman Empire talking about it. We've got all of the evidence that shows that the conception and the inception of the Israeli project was as a settler colonial project. That they were going to move into that region and they were going to eradicate the Arabs. Right? Like, and that they were going to ethnically cleanse Palestine and they were going to steal the land for themselves. They said it out loud. Like, it's a silly position to hold, that Israel just popped out of nowhere and exists, and that there are these Arabs that are just trying to cause them problems because they're anti-Semites. Like, it's just childish. It's childish to think that way. That the British and the Americans fund far right groups, and by the way, this is common, right? This is the common way America acts in the world. That America moves into an area, funds far right neo-Nazi level groups, right? Like they don't give a shit if these people are psychopaths. In fact, that's a benefit to the American empire. And they fund them to overthrow countries, to ethnically cleanse countries, to take countries over however they can, so that the resources of those countries can be transferred to the West and transferred to America, not used for the citizens that live in those countries, but transferred to America. The Israeli project, the Israel project, the Greater Jerusalem project, is very important for the United States empire because Israel exists as a lily pad. It's a major. I mean, you could just take a look at a map. I'm pretty sure you don't look at maps, but if you do look at a map, you can see very clearly, like, here is Palestine, what we here in the West, because we're white supremacists primarily, call Israel. You can see its location is strategically important, right? It allows America, there's America, right, to move into the Mediterranean Sea, right, through the Straits of Gibraltar, right? They can move into the Mediterranean Sea, and they can put anything they want into Israel, right? And then they can operate from Israel into the Middle East. So when the invasion of Iraq happens, the invasion of Afghanistan happens, it's staged in Israel and, of course, in the Arabian Sea and the Gulf of Aden, right? You can also see it's an important position because you can get to it from the other direction. So if you're coming from this way, you can get into Israel that way, right? You can go up here. Israel also stands between, as a land bridge between Africa and the Middle East into China. So it's this break. It's a very, very geopolitical strategic. It's of high importance. I said that like George W. Bush would say that. Yeah, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice. You won't get fooled again. That's how I said that. But that's fine. That Israel is geopolitically extremely important to America's goals in the Middle East. And what are America's goals in the Middle East? Destroy as much as possible. Make it so that these individuated provinces or countries cannot form up and create a new Ottoman Empire. That's the primary goal of the United States here. Secondary goal, extract as much resources as possible. Create as many colonial projects in the region as you possibly can. And that's nothing new for America and Europe, right? America and Europe colonized Africa. They colonized South America, right? They colonize sections of Southeast Asia. The history of Britain and India, for example, right? So it's nothing new there. Right? So this is just a furthering of the settler colonial project. And while they are trying to commit to this section of Israel, they got to fight who? The Palestinians, right? Who they've pushed into Gaza, right? Who they've pushed into the West Bank, and who they're systemically attempting to exterminate, right? And they're doing it. They're live streaming it, right? They're just doing it right in front of us. And the Palestinians are fighting back against it. And of course they're fighting back against it. They don't want to be systemically cleansed. And so for you to stand up against Palestinians, I mean, it puts you in the same kind of moral position as being on the side of the Germans during the Holocaust. Like, morally speaking, that's your moral position, right? Which makes sense, given your transphobia and your kind of inability to engage intellectually, right? Like, it makes sense that somebody who would hate people they don't know would also be pro-genocide and pro-colonial, right? It makes total sense. So, Jamie writes, communism is an ideology that tries to create a communist society which is classless, moneyless, and stateless. Society where the means of production are commonly owned by the workers. Marx, kind of. I actually tend to make the argument, hey, Bubba, how you doing? I make the argument that Marxism is not an ideology, right? People should have food and shelter, and people should earn their fruits of their labor. It's like, I guess it's technically an ideology, but it just seems to be like, yeah, obviously that's the case, right? Is that an ideological thing to say? That if I put in work, I should get the value of that work, right? Is that an ideological thing? Is it ideological to say that everybody should have food and shelter? Like, is that ideological? Seems to me like the ideologies are the ones that spring up to try to justify why people don't have food and shelter. Because everyone should have food and shelter doesn't sound like an ideology. It just sounds like obvious, right? Yeah, like, yes, clearly. Like, it's so I make the argument that Marxism is not an ideology, that it is a scientific observation, that it's a tool, that Marxism is a tool by which we engage reality through a historical or dialectical lens. That's so it's a science and it's a tool. That the moment you start treating it like an ideology, then it manifests all the kind of negative aspects of what an ideology does. And you can end up in places like fundamentalism, and you can end up in these sorts of places, right? And I see that all the time, right? I see that kind of turning to fundamentalism in regards to how Western Marxists analyze China, for example. I think that there's a lot of like fundamentalist thinking involved in the analysis of China, that where someone takes the works of Marx, creates a vision of a future that exists in an abstract space, right? So they create an imagination version of what Marxism is going for, and then they compare the real existent society that actually is moving forward in its revolution, and they say, oh, these two things don't align, therefore what's at fault is not my vision, but reality. And then they do that in order to reject the revolution that's happening in front of them. That China's unfolding revolution has not been perfect and clean, because it can't be. Because Western forces exist, and they have serious military threats that they have to face. And they have to accommodate that, right? They have to accommodate that. And how do I know that Western Marxists can get really fundamentalist about this? Because they'll never talk about war. They'll never actually discuss war. And if you're not discussing war, I don't think you're discussing material reality. Like, you can create a really materialist sounding argument, and an argument that really does sound like it's using Marxism, and it's entrenched in materialism, and it sounds really good and all of this, but omit war. What are you even talking about? What are you even talking about? It's just kind of nonsense now. Like, the moment you start talking about war and like the reality of the Vietnam War and Laos and Cambodia and North Korea, and like you start talking about the reality of what China was experiencing and war, and you start to get a little bit more like, yeah, maybe we should negotiate. Maybe negotiating makes sense. It's doubtful that Karl Marx would have said, you should pursue communism even if it means the wholesale destruction of you and everyone you know and your society and the means of production. Pretty unlikely that Marx would be like, yeah, that's rational. That's a reasonable thing to do. Probably not. Baba writes, everyone should have food and shelter and a stipend guaranteeing we get sex at least once a month. Come on, Baba. Come on, Baba. I'm gonna pretend like that's tongue in cheek. I'm gonna pretend like that's just Baba being a joker. What a joker joke, right? Yeah, I'm gonna pretend like that's a joke, because I don't think Baba wants to go down that line with me. Yeah, hard to be stateless and classless when the United States are frothing at the mouth to topple everything you've created. Like food and shelter as a guarantee, or at least access to the ability to secure food and shelter, right? Like people can grow their own food, right? People can grow their own land or grow on land, but that's all withheld from us by a system of capital, right? And the owners of that system of capital didn't like earn it. Like, what are you talking about? Sex is good for people. There are documented health benefits. Yeah, of course. Look, I one of the major indicators of a declining society is a declining birth rate, right? Like if you're in a population decline, your society is literally in decay, right? Like literally. And the idea that we should use GDP or the stock market as indicators of societal health when we ignore the birth rate, which is like historically low, is wild to me. Like here in Canada, the birth rate's at 1.3. That means that if you have two kids as a couple, you are above average, right? That's wild. That's not even replacement level, right? So the society is in decline. It's in a major, major decline, which is the reason why the capitalists are freaking out and like doing as much immigration as they possibly can. Because their hope is that they're going to do all this immigration and then all these new immigrants are going to become good capitalists. Yeah, right. Like that. Like everything America is doing is just totally self-destructive. Everything the capitalists are doing is completely self-destructive. Like there's going to be internal conflict between ethnic groups. There's going to be internal conflict between owners and owned. Like there's going to be conflict over it. And it's just ridiculous. And the question we should be having, like the conversation we should be having should actually be like, why is the birth rate so low? Why are people not having so much sex? Right? Why is sex in decline? Why is sex something that has become a scarce resource? Why is that the case? And I would argue that capitalists putting everybody to work in full-time jobs that don't pay the rent probably has more to do with it than anything else. Right? That, maybe we shouldn't all be working constantly. Maybe it was a bad idea to have men and women both work full-time jobs for a wage that doesn't buy housing. Right? Like maybe that has something to do with it. Like the whole conversation of like guaranteeing a stipend. What are you fucking even talking about? Like, what are you even fucking talking about? Like, you want us to capitulate to the system of capital to such a degree that we're asking capitalists for permission, where we have to set up like entire systems. Like, who's going to have sex with you? Right? It's probably going to be a prostitute. So you're setting up like a systemic system of prostitution. Sex gives you motivation to do more for many people, can give you more purpose in life. So many men nowadays have self-deleting mindsets because they're lonely and sexually frustrating. No bonding. I think that's true, Bubba. I do. I think that's true. Like, I agree with you that like sex is an important part of the human experience, right? Like we literally need it to survive and procreate and live in reality. That if all the humans stopped having sex, humanity would die. Right, which and that indicates that like why our culture is dying, and if you want to call it a culture, but we're dying, right? Literally, we're dying because we're not promulgating ourselves, we're not propagating, right? And why? Because we don't live in prosperity, because we're not living in a thriving society. We're living in a society of extraction and abandonment, right? And any conversation. Well, here, Bubba, here's a better idea for you. Here's a real idea for you, right? Because the thing that's making it so that people are having less sex, the mechanism in your life that's making it so that people are not having sex with one another is the fact that they don't have time or energy to do so, right? Everybody's working full-time jobs. Everybody's working full-time jobs, and nobody can even pay their rent, right? So this means that people need to get into roommate situations. I know a young lady who works a full-time job and lives with 5 roommates. Her room is literally in the living space with a curtain. Like, that's a literal thing that's actually happening to her. Who's she having sex with? Where? When? At what time? So she's got to negotiate with 4 roommates in order to get this space just to have sex with somebody in the first place. And the person that she wants to have sex with is probably also working a full-time job and is also in a similar situation. Like, Maybe we should tell these capitalists to go fuck themselves. Maybe we should all stop working so hard. Maybe we should not give a shit what the system of capital has to say, so that we can live in apartments, so that we can have the space, the time, and the energy to even just find somebody to fuck. Like, no, we're not going to create a system of systemic prostitution in order to compromise with these fucking psychopath capitalists. Like, it's wild to me. Yep, there's a lot of struggle for enough money, and we waste so much time to get money. Yeah, and money isn't real. Isn't that the best part? So we take the only resource that actually matters to us, our time, right? You don't know how much you've got, and it's certainly the most valuable thing you have. And it's not close. Like, if you don't think your time has the value that you think it does, you're definitely wrong. We take the time we have, and we go to places we hate, to work for people we don't know, to do a task that's likely pointless, so that we can get invisible scraps of paper and numbers on screens that we trade for food and shelter, our survival. So most of us are in the game right now just to survive. Right? That's what most of us are actually doing. We're just in the game just to survive. And the capitalists are aware of that. The capitalists are aware of it. And they use that against us. Like, that's fucking stupid. It's a stupid way to organize a society. It's a stupid way to live. It's a stupid way to be. Yeah, in the 1950s, a family of 4 could own a house, a car on one income. Fast forward to now, both people working can't afford a place without a roommate and can't afford children. Progress? I mean, it's progressing through the system of capital. Has a New Bookshelf says, how can we respond to those who are dogmatic Marxists and who are critical of USSR after Lenin and critical of China's entire socialist project? I mean, I do tend to think that when it comes to China, xenophobia plays a little bit. Like, I think that that's real. Like, I think that people, like, as you can be a racist and be a communist, right? Like, that happens. And you can have that. Like, it exists. And the I think the only way to respond is to just keep focusing on the historical material analysis and just keep bringing in to question Western here's an observation that I've just kind of been keying into recently. Western Marxists have extremely good material analysis. Their material analysis is accurate. Their historical analysis is trash. They actually don't have a historical analysis most of the time. And so one of the things that I've really been working on, because when you find a Marxist or a communist in the first place, the last thing you want to do is alienate them, right? You want to try to bring them in and try to show that you're an ally. And one of the things that I think I've been sort of experimenting with is the idea of saying, I think that you have a really strong material analysis, and they often do. Like, their facts are correct, right? Which I think already puts them in a good place, right? It's already great that they're using evidence and facts, and those evidence and facts are usually correct, right? but you just say, I think your material analysis is good. I think it's correct, and I don't really have anything to say against it. But I think that that there's also a historical analysis that goes along with those material facts, right? That you have to couple a material analysis with a historical analysis, and that historical analysis should include war, because if there is any ruling class of any configuration anywhere at any time, I don't care if you're a monarchy, if you're a tribal society, if you're a democracy, an autocracy, I don't care if you're fascist or communist. I don't care what the structure of your civil society is. If there is a ruling class within it, their primary objective is to avoid total war. Without a doubt, right? Without a doubt. That the only time you want your rulers to commit to war is if they think that they can win. And if they think that they can win, and if they can win with little sacrifice, that's even better. Right? And what you don't want is a society that that fights wars it doesn't need to fight. Well, that's what you don't want. Right? And once you start talking about the history of communist China through the lens of war, with the threat of total war, then the rise of Dangism and the move into capitalist appeasement, what they call capitalist restoration, but what I call capitalist appeasement, becomes a lot easier to understand. Right? Like, the only reason the communists were able to take over in China is because of World War II, right? World War II occupied the European powers, right, and the United States. That's when China fights its big war and its big wars. That's when the communists fight their big wars, right? It's during the rebuilding period when the capitalists are weakest, right? But they watched the Nazis go into Russia. They watched the destruction. 20 million people died in Russia, right? They watched 2 nuclear bombs go off in the island nation of Japan, off their coast. And then after they succeed in their revolution, and you've got the Great Leap Forward, the Cultural Revolution, and all of that under Mao. Well, while all that is happening, the United States builds up to start wars. Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, North Korea, South Korea, right? This is China's border, right? Not including the Indonesian genocides that happened during this period of time. So the West is heavily involved in war all over the place, which, incidentally, the communists are fighting. The reason why North Korea exists is because of China's support. And and that the Americans are doing this while frothing at the mouth, screaming about how they've got to staunch the spread of communism. So the Maoist line says, keep fighting. Fight, 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 fight. Keep fighting. Well, eventually the populace begins to pivot away from that because they don't know that they can win. Moreover, they've seen what winning looks like. Right? In World War II, the Russians won. They lost 20 million people. They lost major cities and major infrastructure. Stalingrad is the big one, right? Like, the city was rubble. Just hollowed out completely. It looked like Gaza. Like, so a new line of thought comes out of the Communist Party. And that line of thought, which we call Dangism, says we should unify the classes in China. We should stop fighting our internal class-based conflict in China that Mao has been fighting this entire time. The Cultural Revolution is a big part of that. We should stop that. And we should focus our energy collectively as a unified China against the international bourgeoisie. Against the Americans, who, incidentally, are currently bombing on our border. We are sending troops into that territory in order to try to help these people as the Americans bomb the shit out of the place. And that the Dangists came in and they recognized, and this I think is the most important point, they recognized that they could create an alternative battlefield. That Western Marxists want to pretend as though China just laid down and allowed capitalism in, and now the place is fully capitalist and it's a capitalist place. And that's false. Observably false. Once you do a historical analysis. That what China is actually doing is opening up a new battleground. An economic battleground. That the Dangists secure peace for China. That's already a big win. That's already a massive win. Yes, they had to open up their economy to foreign investors. Correct. True. Capitalist appeasement. What you might call capitalist restoration. But I call capitalist appeasement. Because it allows foreign capital to come in. And again, this is crucial. It ends up with the Western capitalists building the means of production in China. That the Western capitalists, that China doesn't seize the means of production from the Western capitalists, they trade for it. Because the Chinese Marxists, which include Dangists, understand how economics actually works, and American capitalists do not. American capitalists think the point of doing things is for money. They think that it's about getting lots of money. Chinese economists, Marxists, understand that it's about building the means of production. The means of production is the center of your economic power. Financialization is not. And Western capitalists don't understand that. If they did understand it, they'd be Marxists. And so the Dangists open up a battlefield, of an economic battlefield, to fight Western capital, which they clearly win. And it's impossible to say that the Chinese did not win that. Their prosperity has gone through the roof, as Deng said it would. They've managed to create a more equal society. Wages have gone up. Prosperity has gone up. Living standards have gone up. Life expectancy, literacy, every single line that you want to measure a society on that isn't the GDP or the stock market is up wildly, like dramatically. So dramatic that it's having neighboring countries be like, oh fuck, how do we do this for ourselves? Oh my God. Very impressive. And they managed to do this while also avoiding a war. Like, do you think China would be more prosperous if its cities were rubble? Would it be more prosperous if the country was ravaged by war and destroyed? There was a moment when Nixon had to be talked down by Kissinger because Nixon wanted to drop a nuke. Like, so this Maoist line and this Marxist purity line, this ideological Marxism, this Marxist fundamentalism that comes out of Western Marxists basically says the Chinese should have turned their country into rubble. Instead of avoiding total war, capitulating and appeasing capitalists, allowing foreign investment to come into China to do the things that capitalism often does, creates inequality, can create class-based strife and struggle. But the Dangists did that knowing that that's what was going to happen, because they were Marxists. And they had done the analysis, and they understood what the outcome was going to be. And they said down the line, other communist rulers are going to have to kind of rejigger this. Like, there's going to be problems, and you're going to have to deal with those problems. Here's some strategies. for how to deal with those problems when they arise and when they come up. And guess what they're doing? Exactly that. So the Chinese are fighting an economic battle on an economic battlefield because they chose the battlefield they knew they could win in, instead of fighting a war they think they would lose. Or if they won, it would be a Pyrrhic victory. And that's not what's understood by Western Marxists. The Chinese are fighting the fight they're gonna win, because they've got the tools and the know-how and the initiative, and they think that they know economics better than the Americans, and the proof is in the pudding. Like, the proof is absolutely in the pudding. And it's all well and good to say that the Chinese should have an internal class-based struggle against their own internal bourgeoisie, but they've got international bourgeois breathing down their neck. And the international bourgeoisie is willing to drop bombs over it. Like, is willing to carpet bomb China. Is willing to nuke China. Like, let's not fuck around with this. And so I think China has made a very prudent series of choices, prudent decisions, and have been very wise and are well within the confines of Marxism. Like, well within. I don't think that they are revisionist. I don't think that they're any of that. I think that Karl Marx would look at what China has done and been like, yeah. Like, nowhere in the works of Marx does it say destroy your entire country, sacrifice your children to the altar of communism. Like, nowhere is that written. Right? Like, Marxism is about building prosperity. It's about improving the quality of life for people. It's about making things better. And you know what would really make things really bad for people? Having their cities turned to rubble in nuclear bombardment. That would really make that situation really bad. And even if they managed to win, and even if they managed to push back, and even if they managed to go to America, and even if they managed to take things over, and they managed to do it, they'd lose 100 million citizens doing it. So I think that what China has done is well within the confines of communism, well within the confines of Marxism. I don't understand why Western Marxists think it's a good idea to have 10% of the population die in total war and infrastructure destruction and death and all of that. Like, I don't understand why that's seen as positive. And the reason why they think that way is because they have no historical analysis. They have a material analysis where they treat Marxism like a religion, like an ideology. And so they become fundamentalists because they put the real China, the existent China, as a snapshot up against their imagined version of what Marxism and what Marxist society should look like. And then when they see that those two don't align, they say that it's China that must change, not my dogma. And all it takes to banish the dogma is just a historical analysis of China, which they don't do. Right? So that's the most roundabout way of saying, how can we respond to those who are dogmatic Marxists and were critical of USSR after Lenin, critical of China's entire socialist project? My response has steadily become, I encourage you to investigate a historical analysis. Because what they're doing is they're analyzing the situation materially and probably doing a good job of it. Like, really? I think that's true. But their historical analysis is total dog shit. Like, you need both. Bubba writes, I don't like when for-profit incentives takes over all else and companies produce less and shut down a lot of their buildings to save money and lay off workers. Yeah. Yep. But that's the strategy, Bubba. That's how you abandon, right? Like, you extract as much wealth as you can, and then you just fuck off. And if that means those people starve, oh fucking well. Just Me writes, not profit organizations also need to be opened up for criticism when the biggest part of the hose to pay Yeah, when the biggest part of it is to pay the top executives at nonprofits, something needs to change. Yeah. Nonprofits have to be structured like corporations. We need more worker co-ops. Worker co-ops, dude. I actually think the worker co-op line, one of I am actually like, I'm kind of angling to see if I can turn the place that I work into a worker co-op. I think that I can. I think that I can do it. I think I've got enough people who are interested in that kind of thinking in positions, and the ownership at the very top of it is very. Um, there's a sense of detachment amongst the ownership class that like for one of them it's like a project, it's just something he's doing to spend his days doing something, right? But for the other two, they're basically just silent partners. They don't care as long as line goes up. Doesn't matter to them how it happens. And I think that I could probably talk those guys into, when they want to finally get out of this project and they want to sell, I think that I could talk them into selling it to the workers. The trouble becomes, could we convince a bank? Could we convince a bank to go along with that? And that's where the real trouble lay, in my view, in the worker co-op. Not only do you need to convince ownership that transferring it over to the workers is a good idea, you've got to convince the banks. And I think the banks are ideologically opposed. I think the banks themselves are like, nope, if it's not one person that is like a trust fund baby and it's a group of workers, we're not interested in getting involved. Well, I mean, worker co-ops are I think, going to be an important piece of the puzzle. Like, businesses should be run by the workers, and the workers should be the ones that are the primary beneficiaries and are the primary decision makers, right? The workers are the ones that actually have to live with the consequences of management. The workers are the ones that actually have to live in the community and live in the society and live with the decisions that are being made, right? Like, I've been part of companies that went from being like good community stalwarts to basically just becoming husks, just completely destroyed. And it's sad to watch. It's sad to see like community outreach and community organizations just become dead. And that's the system of capital to a T. To get a charity number in Ontario, you have to be an executive director of a CFO and have it structured just like a corporation. It's why a lot of us who want to run a community shelter can't get funds. Oh, how interesting. Right? Like, this is what we're talking about when we're talking about like the structural unfairness. Like, it's just structurally unfair. It's designed to be structurally unfair. Yeah. We have a fellow in Twitch, Ham. Western countries don't want to build public housing. Yeah, 90% of Chinese are homeowners. Exactly. Haley writes, if China dissolved their power structures, how many days do you think it would take for the Americans to annex China? America will never annex China. Like, China exists in such a way that I don't think Westerners understand it. Right? Like, I have a glimmer of it. I think I'm only like a couple of steps ahead in this regard, which is that China is a 4,000-year-old civilization, that the people of China have been living there as Chinese people for thousands of years. The West does not understand that. The West is barely a culture. Right? Europe has more culture in it, but the United States and Canada, like, we barely exist in terms of how nations operate and how nations are. Like, we don't have a culture. Our culture is Europe. Like, we came from Europe, ethnically cleansed this place, destroyed the indigenous population, stole their land, and now we're basically just living in the kind of edifices of that. And we haven't built a culture or a civilization of any sort. We have no authors worth reading, or we have no artists that are of a high standard or a high stature, really. We've got lots of glitz and glam. We're like a little kid just shrieking at the top of his lungs, and everybody's like, "Ooh, pay attention to that." And there's lots of wealth after World War II and all of this, and so we had the world's attention. But like, uh, uh, but when you compare that to what China has, like, it's just not the same. Like, it's just not the same, you know? Like, China has a sense of itself, and there's a sense of unity within China and within the Chinese ethos and amongst Chinese people that I don't think Westerners quite get. And I think most of us are never going to get. That, like, we can live in a quote unquote society that just, where there's homeless people and you just walk by them and there they are. What are you going to do? Right? Whereas the Chinese are like, what are you going to do? Get those people off the street. That's what you're going to do. Why? Because they're Chinese. And it's simple as that. And it's just built in. It's just how they think, and it's just how it is. They're just not going to tolerate it. Whereas we're just like, yeah, rich people think so, so okay. So I just don't think that we can understand that type of thinking and that type of being. Haley writes, Matt Remps is the most valuable piece of Canadian culture. That makes sense because I have no idea who that is. So, of course, that makes him very valuable. Ontario, just me says, Ontario's housing minister keeps cutting funds from community housing because his family grew up in a communist country and doesn't want Canada to be communist. Yeah, right. Yeah, so his family grew up in a communist country that he fled, so he's probably a fascist, right? It's like saying, like, we fled from Fidel Castro. Oh, we were so rich back in Cuba, and he just took it. Kevin, good to see you, man. Australia would be lumped into the same group as US and Canada there. Yeah, Australia is an oddball one, man. I was just talking about Australia. Like, Australia should jump ship. They just pony up with China. And they should just, like, not worry about it. They should just straight up just be like, yeah, you know what? China's there. It's huge. It's got a big economic impact. We should just buddy up. Yeah, China. Yeah, they're all right. Right? Good day, mate. Hey? We got nothing wrong with the China. We should be buddies. All right? What do you think? All right? Oh yeah, of course. No, of course they're Western colonizers, of course. I don't know that it would do to start measuring that kind of thing. Bubba writes, "Do you still get your favorite burritos like you would mention back in 2020?" Are you the same Bubba from back in the day, bud? Wow. I don't really go get burritos much anymore, honestly. It's more of a summer thing, although summer's upon us. Maybe I'll do it again soon. It was so good. I'm doing like half price chicken wings on Wednesdays now. That's my big treat for the week. Because it's nice. And it gets me down to the beaches. I get to walk down the beach, right? Spend some time on the beach. It's nice. It's nice. It's a nice way to be. It's a nice way to be. That might be why people think the West is the inheritor of the Roman Empire, to have a long legacy like China. I guess so. Like, we're trying to cobble together the conception that the Western world has a culture, but we don't really. Like, especially in North America, like, our culture is inherently self-destructive, right? Like it's about destruction. We believe in chaos, what we call the free market, right? So we have this inherent desire, and the way that we think about and we interact with culture is on a very transactional level. It's very transactional, which is why most of the art that gets produced these days is distractionary at best. It can be described as distractionary. And that's like Star Wars, the entire Marvel anthology, Disney, right? Like, most of the things that are being created today exist on a transactional level. They exist to be consumed as distraction. That when you go home from work and sit on the couch, you get an hour of, delightment or entertainment or whatever before you go to sleep, so that you can wake up and do more capitalism, right? Like that's the structure of it. And uh, uh, and so in such a culture, like nothing gains any permanence. Nothing really matters. There isn't any, like, none of this Marvel stuff is going to make it. It's going to be like the Westerns of yore, right? Like the Westerns of yore didn't really make it. There's a couple, like I would say like Tombstone, for example, does pretty well. But Westerns are dying out and people will forget them, just like the silent film era, right? Like there's like an intangible quality to it. And because all of this stuff is being produced just so that, people can sit on the couch and be distracted for an hour. Bubba writes, yeah, I'd watch all your videos during the COVID-19 lockdown, pretty much up until maybe 2023. Guess you're not interested in making videos anymore, but that's okay. Bubba, man, I'm in constant debate with myself about the videos. I really am. And I don't and I don't know where I'm going to land on it. I'm You know what it really is, dude? Like this is really what it is. And maybe there's validity to this and maybe there isn't, but this is what I feel. Is that since I started doing the live stream, a lot of the things that I would talk about in those videos, I'm talking about on the live stream. And I'm finding the live stream to be emotionally and spiritually more cathartic and more valuable for me personally. This is all a vanity project after all, Bubba. It's all about me, baby. It's all about me. But I really enjoy interacting with people like in this manner, in order to find solidarity, in order to share successes, in order to air concerns, in order to have every so often a guest on to talk about these things. I like this free form way of doing it, and I enjoy responding to people as they come in. I kind of like the chaotic nature of it. I never know what's going to happen next. Right? Someone's going to come in, like, I'm going to have an idea of what I'm going to talk about, and then someone's going to come in and be like trans people, and suddenly I'm going to spend a half hour talking about trans issues. Right? And a lot of it is like sharpening myself and sharpening my own initiative and all of that. And I really enjoy it. If I could do more of it, I would. Right? If I could do more about it, I would. But so what that means, though, is that for the video aspect of it, the only reason I would do a video is to advertise. Because the live stream is what I care about. This is what I want. This is kind of what I always wanted. But I just didn't know how to do it, and I didn't have the confidence to be able to do it. Looking back on my life, I think that's sort of the regret, is that I wish when YouTube came in, I immediately started doing it, and I looked at everybody who was going to be skeptical of me, and I just said, shut up, I don't care. I'm going to do it. I don't care. I'm doing it. I wish I had done that. But I waited. And I waited too long, because now I'm showing up after people like Hasanabi and Vosh and Destiny, all these guys, are entrenched. And it's like, dang, I could have been there. I could have been entrenched too. But, that's how it goes. That's life. And so I'm not going to hang on to that. And so what that means is that the videos, I would only do the videos as a form of advertising. Right? I would take one of the issues that I've been talking about, and I would make a video in order to do a 5-minute walk around, do a 10-minute walk around to funnel people to the live stream. And that's probably not a bad idea. Right? It's probably not a bad idea. It's probably not a bad thing to do, right? And it probably would encourage growth of the channel. It probably would help me out, honestly. But it introduces into the way I think about all of this kind of business mindset and a kind of a form of commodification. It's not explicitly commodification, but it's like, I'm not doing it because I want to tell you the truth about something. I'm doing it so that you'll come see me in my live stream. And that change of the video in my own conception, from being a way for me to get news out and a way for me to introduce new ideas into the world, shifting from that into a way to advertise to people so that they can come to a place where I'm doing that kind of thing has definitely discouraged me from doing them. And it's definitely made me lose interest in doing them because it feels inauthentic. It feels more manipulative. It feels more manipulative. It's not me being like, this is what I think, and if you're going to listen, you're going to listen, and if you want to come talk to me, that's fine. But instead, it's like, hey, here are things that I talk about. Here's a video that I do. Come to my live stream. It just feels more capitalist. Feels like that. And maybe it isn't. Maybe I'm overthinking it. Maybe I shouldn't think that way. Maybe this is just my own fear. And my fear, like, I finally kind of got what I wanted, where I got the live stream and people are watching and it's really great. And I don't want to jeopardize that somehow, or maybe I would start doing the video again and then realize that this live stream thing was always a bad idea and I would hate that. So it's just these fears. It's these fears that I have. And I don't know, as I'm talking about it, like, maybe I should just do the video. Just do it. Just do it. And just start putting them out again. And who cares if they're just advertising? Like, who cares? Right? So what? Isn't that a good idea? Don't I want to promote myself? Don't I want to send just small soundbite things into places to be like, hey, I'll do a live stream. This is what we talk about. This is what we're doing. Don't I want that? Don't I want more people here? Don't I want that? Isn't that something I should be doing? Yeah, maybe. And of course, there's a bunch of you that listen in who like those videos, who like them. And then I just feel like I get in a moral, like a purity way. Like I get in my own purity, like, oh, well, the video I'm making is not going to be like a high quality kind of thing. It's just me walking around talking. Like, who cares? Like, I should do this and I should do that. And it would be better if I had this and, oh, a green screen and all that kind of stuff. And so I get into my own head about it. Yeah, and maybe I shouldn't. Yeah, maybe I shouldn't. Maybe I should just shut my mouth and do a video. Yeah, it wouldn't be hard to do. I'd literally, like, when I was walking home, I could just walk down to the graveyard, walk around the graveyard, hit record, do something, and then just upload it and then just spread it around. It'd be easy. I've done it before. I know exactly how to do it. Yeah. Good talk, Bubba. Thanks for coming in. I appreciate it. Yeah, and short videos are good for sharing on social media. That's true. That's definitely true. Social media really thrives on that. I think that's what TikTok's all about. TikTok's just about, like, quick soundbite ideas and thoughts. And I think that's why it's gotten so popular and is so prolific and why they're going to ban the shit out of it. And Bubba says, you're good at speaking and running with your thoughts in a natural way, so lives work well for you. That's kind of you to say, Bubba. I appreciate that. I appreciate that. I in many ways, doing this has been, and will continue to be, I'm sure, very cathartic. It's very cathartic for me and one of the things that I'm really happy about is that it's revealed to me that I have a lot of patience. Not endless patience, obviously, as you guys have seen. But I have a lot of patience, and I'm very proud of that about myself. And it's really helped me see the world through other people's eyes, and see the complexity of other people's existences. And I get to talk to people from all over the world. People come in here and at least claim to, and I get to learn things about the world. And it's just so delightful. There's something really delightful about all of this. I'm really quite pleased that anyone is even listening. That's the part about this whole journey, Bubba, that has been miraculous. And I don't use that word lightly. genuinely miraculous, that when I hit record and I start streaming, people listen. I don't understand it. I don't think I'm supposed to understand it. I'm just supposed to talk. But I'm glad for it. I'm so glad. I've talked to people who have done this kind of thing, who've done live streaming and have built a successful community. And almost every single one of them has told me that when they first started, they hit record, no one was there. They stopped the stream and no one was there. Nobody even came in. Nobody cared. But they did it, and they did it anyway because they believed in it and they believed themselves, and they slowly built a community and they got it off the ground and they did it. I have never experienced hitting record and having nobody there. There's always been somebody there. And so I'm so extremely grateful for that. I'm so grateful for that. Bubba says, I watch videos from a channel called Millennial Steam, and he talks about how bad work and the economy is, and I could totally see you doing the same in the way that hooks people in, come back for more. Yeah. Yeah. I definitely see where you're coming from, Bubba. I mean, with a face this handsome, right? It's a waste to just be doing radio. Second Thought's a great channel. For sure he is. All of the information you pull up on these different tabs is available to us as well. People tune in to hear your content after it runs through the bias funnel of John. I think that there's a lot. I think that you guys are tuning in for a couple. I have theories. One is I think it's catharsis. I think that we get isolated. We feel separated. I think it's better than it has been, but for a long time, I think people definitely were surrounded by people who just were capitalist bots, and they weren't thinking that way. And so a voice like mine, I think, offers solidarity and catharsis. I also think that, and I'm quite proud of this. It's something that I came to understand. I have a different way of looking at the world, and I take different perspectives. So like when the concept of a hot take came through, and people started saying hot take, but, and they would offer a perspective that maybe they hadn't heard before, or unpopular take. I always just found myself there, that I was always just people would present things as a both sides issue. And it's but there's this obvious third thing. There's this obvious other thing. Nobody's talking about it. And so I would like to. Bubba writes, that's incredible. You're a talented speaker, so I'm actually surprised you're not at 10K subscribers. That's kind of you to say, Bubba. That is kind of you to say. I mean, I've definitely been shadow banned, Bubba. I got banned off TikTok twice. That guy says, I'm here for the nuance. Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. Because I definitely try to do that. I don't take things as big blocks. Things are definitely more nuanced than that. Mikhail writes, I tune in for a place to communicate with comrades and figure out what it means to be a comrade and what comrades think it means to be a comrade. Yeah. Solidarity. Right? Solidarity. Just to try to figure out what the fuck is going on. Right? Marcus writes, I sell my services as an owner-operator, so I'm not surrounded with capitalist bots, really. I just want to hear your takes on the world, I guess. Well, you know what, Marcus? Just say you love me. That's all. Just tell me you love me. I love you too, Marcus. Yeah, I mean, that's another reason why I've been a little bit... not against. Against is way too strong, but I've just been discouraged. That's what it is. I've been discouraged about doing videos as advertising because I've definitely been shadow banned. Social media platforms will outright ban me. I've for sure been shadow banned on YouTube. I've for sure been shadow banned on Twitch. The shadow banning is real. And Sometimes I can see it happen in real time where uh, maybe I'll start a stream and I'll just be talking about kind of innocuous nothing stuff. And I especially saw this on TikTok before they just outright banned me, where I'd be talking about innocuous stuff or, like, oh, well, work was tough, right? Like normal, everyday, banal kind of stuff. And then I would pull up an article and be like, okay, Ukraine. And I would start talking about the Ukrainian conflict and the numbers would just like right away, right? Or Israel is ban worthy. Like that's what got me banned this time around, was talking about Israel. And they just ban people for that. So like I actually do agree. I think I would be doing better if all things were equal, right? But the algorithm promotes fascism and shadow bans communism. So that's what's actually going on. The videos that get the most traction are short form, under 60 seconds, with graphics that switch every 2 seconds. TikTok brain is a new insult against modern attention spans. Or like the thing where there's like a video on one side and then there's like a video game or someone cutting soap or something on the other side. And so this person is doing something, but then there's this other activity to like fire off your dopamine sensors. Bubba writes, I don't want you to be peer pressured into doing anything you don't have desire or ambition to do. You're where you are because you did what you wanted and did it great. That's so kind of you to say, Bubba. Bubba, I'm so happy that you're here right now, dude. You're just like a little balm on all of like I have these like sore spots in my consciousness, and you're just like, yes, pretty bird. I'll take it, dude. I'll take it. But I think it's good to go over that. I think it's good to go over the video thing, because you're not the only person who's mentioned it, and it's something that I really think, like, when I think about increasing the amount of energy I put into this project, that's probably where I should put the energy. Yeah. And I do want to increase the energy I put into this project. Like, up until recently, I've basically been doing what I can, but now I feel like I can do more, and the videos are probably where that energy should go. Not out of a sense of peer pressure, not out of any of that kind of stuff, but because I think it would be effective and it would work for the channel, and it would be beneficial for the channel. So I should start doing those at least one a week. I think that would be easy to commit to. One a week? That's not such a hardship. That's not so difficult. I could have done that today. I could have done a video today, for sure, if my commitment is a video a week. And I think that there's a couple of people who are regulars on my stream that would be like really, really happy about that. Oh, Marcus. Oh yeah, okay. Let's. Somebody mentioned something about it before. You got to tell us why while Hassan is up on your screen, that you don't think he's a capitalist LARPing as a comrade. Okay. I don't usually like to critique other leftists or talk about other leftists, but I think Hassan has ascended into another level where it's permissible now, because he's no longer like, I don't want to criticize some other small channel. You know what I mean? Like, Hassan has ascended. He's no longer some other channel. He's his own institution at this point. First of all, the only real reason I liked is just because I liked the sentiment of this particular tweet. Every right-wing guy donor that made sure college campuses had to host Ben Shapiro and Milo Yiannopoulos for free speech is currently calling for the National Guard to come and take care of 18-year-olds who dare speak out against Israelis' unconscionable actions. I think Hassan is fairly well... Yep. $5 million house, McLaren's in the garage, $1,000 t-shirts in public. Yep. Hassan reminds us that communism is not anti-prosperity. Okay? It isn't. Communism is in fact about growing prosperity. That's that line of thought is within Marxist thought. That it wants to see, Marxists want to see prosperity for everyone and want to live in a country and a culture and a civilization and a society where everyone is prospering, right? So it's not anti-prosperity. So simply pointing out that Hassan is prosperous isn't a knock. Doesn't really convince me anything, right? Uh, uh, what I think, look, if you want to hear my most devastating critique of Hassan, my most devastating critique of Hassan is that he's gotten lazy. That he used to be, uh, uh, like he's sharp. He understands the lore and the rhetoric. He understands all of that, and his analysis is usually pretty solid. But he's gotten lazy, and it's the money that's made him lazy. That he doesn't really have skin in the game anymore. And it seems to me that he is happy that he no longer has skin in the game, and he's not interested in putting skin back in the game. Because if he did that, then he might lose something, right? And so I think he has followed the extraction and abandonment line that is indicative of the culture, including capitalist, which is that he got his wealth, he got his money, he extracted it, and now he's just gonna stand by and watch. And while that's happening, his commentary has gotten pretty lazy. And I think people go to his channel now out of a force of habit more than anything else. Like, I haven't really seen him say much of anything that has made me... Like, his takes aren't really great anymore. Because they're kind of boilerplate now. Like Israel is a settler colonial state. Got it. Like, yeah. It's not really a hot take. It's not really like... I've really come to find that when I listen to Hassan, I don't really listen to Hassan anymore, because the things that he says, I would rather listen to like John Mearsheimer or like I'd rather get it from the source. You know, Hassan is like a secondhand source, and it's like I'd prefer to just listen to like Jeffrey Sachs. I'd prefer to listen to Chris Hedges. I'd prefer to listen to even like Noam Chomsky or Michael Parenti. Like, I would prefer to just go to the source. No, Norm Finkelstein during the Israel situation. I was consuming a lot of Norm Finkelstein, right? So I just don't know why he exists anymore, outside of just being a shock jock, which is fine. I think that communism and communists need a shock jock, but I don't think he's a particularly good one anymore. Like, and that to me, I think, is my biggest critique of Hassan, is that I don't think he's even interesting anymore. Like, I think that people love him, and I think that he's got a following, and I think he's always going to have that following, unless he does something crazy. But I think it's just because they've gotten comfortable with him, and they kind of like him for that. But I don't think he's a kind of a culturally relevant or an interesting commentator anymore. And I think the reason why that's the case is because he's in a position now where he should be doing more. And he should be getting more involved in a more serious way. And he should be getting more aggressive. Like, he's buying houses and t-shirts and kind of like, you know, having a young man with wealth. Like, I don't hold that against him at all. But he's not building communist power. Like, how is Hassan building legitimate, real, material political movement? And the answer to that is that he's not. And he's not because he's worried he's going to lose stuff. Right. This is the line that I used to use, and I forgot. This is it. Hassan is more interested in building a business than he is in building a movement. That's what it is. That at the end of the day, this was always him building a business and not a movement. And that's kind of what it's become. He succeeded. He's built a successful business. So now it's just like watching a businessman talk about the world. And he still has this leftist perspective, and he still has this communist read, and he still has all that kind of stuff, but this is his business model. And and his takes can be good, and they can be accurate, but it's still a business. And so if he ever becomes politically active and actually starts to use his wealth politically in order to achieve political goals, then he'll become interesting again. But until then, he's just a guy running a business and not really building a movement. Yeah, seems the best way to silence anti-cap voices is to elevate them into the bourgeoisie. That's why you know these guys are idiots, right? Like that's why you know the capitalists are idiots. Because the best way to ensure loyalty in the system is to keep the people you promised loyalty to in on your side, right? Like if the narrative was slave your life away for us and you will get prosperity, well then you better deliver that prosperity. Like I know plenty of people who did everything right, took out the student loan, paid off the student loan, got the big important job, had the 2.3 kids, did every single thing correct, did everything they were told to do, followed exactly the capitalist line and exactly the capitalist rhetoric from the beginning of their life to the modern day, and they've been fucking abandoned. They can't get a house. They don't know what the future is going to look like for their children. This indicates to me that the people who are at the top of this thing, the capitalists, are desperately stupid. Desperately stupid. Desperately stupid. Because if you're not going to make sure that that person has a house, if you're going to say to that person, well, tough shit, you should have predicted the 2008 financial crash or whatever kind of dumb nonsense, right? If you're going to abandon those people, like it's over for you. The system of capital is a fraudulent system and everybody can see it. It's naked. The only reason the system of capital can limp along now is because there's a bunch of fucking boomers. Well, guess what? They're going to die. And when the millennials take over, there's going to be a small handful of us that are going to have more money than the pharaohs of yore. And there's going to be a whole lot of us that are going, we should just end this, right? Like there's no popular resistance to that idea anymore. There's just a handful of psychopaths with all of the money their dads gave them, right? Right. So we're going to vote that away. We're going to get rid of that, right? Because the system of capital betrays even itself at the end of it all. It has no loyalty, not even to itself. And if the capitalists were smart, that's exactly what they would do. They would just take these people who did everything right and just say, oh, here's your house. Yeah, as a reward, of course, as we promised. But they're too stupid for that. Just Me writes, how dystopian. The PM of Australia posted on Twitter that free speech is a dangerous tool and must be restricted. Like, in regards to what? It just feel like free speech. Like, what does that mean for people? Because people seem to think that free speech means that you can, like, threaten people's lives. Like, that's what they think it means. It's just, like, the most embarrassing shit. Yeah, I think, Bubba, I think you're hitting on something, too. Something that I'm really concerned about for myself as well. Try to stay away from channels that upload every day like it's a business first. It's basically turned into entertainment only. A waste of time to those who want to learn something new without filters. Yeah, I think you're onto something with that. Because I do think that people are turning this stuff into a business, and they're just trying to make a business out of it. Which, I mean, don't get me wrong. If this channel could pay all my bills, it'd be great. But one of the promises that I've made to myself, and I'm going to try to really stay true to that promise, is to funnel this into political activity. Like this is not a means to an end for me. This is a continuation into the political world. I'm becoming part of politics in a serious way. And the hope that we can alter our political reality. Like, and it seems to me like once I have enough wealth to be able to buy a $5 million house, I should be able to do that. Yeah. Well, guys, we've reached the end of this one. We're a little over time. Always remember, each and every one of you is a quantum being, walking around in quantum energy. These billionaires are spending hundreds of billions of dollars in the hopes you'll never realize it. You'll just stay the good little commodity they need you to be. Rebel. Revolt. Repent. Good luck. We're going to need it.